Hello, and welcome to Dungeons and Devs, the show where we get a bunch of game developers together in different groups every week, and we just talk to them about various game dev related topics. I'm Xavier. I'm a 3D character artist at Insomniac Games, currently working on Spider-Man for the PS4, and I've got a really good group together today, and we're pretty excited to talk about some game dev stuff, but more importantly, to play some Dungeons and Dragons. So I'm just going to go down the line alphabetically and let you guys introduce yourselves. Caitlin, do you want to tell us a little about yourself, what you do, and how you've gotten into or are getting into the game industry?
I think I'm the least developed of all the developers here. My name's Caitlin Blenz. I've been doing art for 3 years now. Yeah, 3 years. I used to do it on Neopets. So that's like my origin story is Neopets. And that's how I started art. Because on Neopets, you were legit if you had like a custom character. So not just like your little Neopets, like you came up with a custom design for it. You came up with a backstory. You came up with a name. You started role playing a story for it. Like that's where my start was. But then I got into middle school and kids started making fun of me for it. So I like kind of backed off of it and got into WoW. And that was like a whole nother career. But I didn't start seriously taking art until 3 years ago. And I still have a year left, so I'm actually still a student.
But you actually recently did an internship, right?
So yeah, I was at Ryzen Art, and they aren't publishers, they're outsourcers. And they're really cool because everybody's just super focused on art, and everybody that's there is super, super, super good. And they've been doing it for so long. So I was only there for about 2 months because it was just a summer internship. But I think that in those 2 months, like I probably learned the most in such a short amount of time just about like modeling. And like I got to see how people did pipelines, and it was great.
They do everything from movies to video games to all kinds of other things, right?
Yeah, and the cool thing too is there are two people who are in charge. It's Alan and Ricky. So it's a studio that's owned by a woman.
I've met them several times, and it's always great to catch up with them.
Yeah, they're a very good group of people.
Well, awesome. Thank you for being here, Caitlin. Crystal, what about you? Tell us a little about yourself, how you got into games, and what you do.
My name is Crystal Mora. I am a recruiting generalist for Naughty Dog. I've been gaming since probably every console since the original Nintendo. I used to draw a lot, and I actually went to school and studied animation at a small trade school in Arizona where I'm from, and then came out here to LA. I realized that my strengths really, even though I loved art as a passion, what I was better at was sort of the administrative and support roles, I guess, but always wanting to be around those creative types. Previous to Naughty Dog, I was working at a school called Nomen, which trains students in visual effects for film, not just visual effects, entertainment design and art for the film, TV, game industry. So I was doing that, and with the skill sets I developed there, I was doing social media, I did alumni relations, and did events. So we had studios from the industry who would come in, speakers who would talk with the students, and that's kind of where I got my connections from Naughty Dog. And one of the recruiters reached out. He was leaving and wanted to see if I've been interested. So I've been doing that. No recruiting background, but art, admin, big fan of games. I've been doing that for about a year and a half now.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. It's always great to get people who aren't, because I know a lot of artists. It's great to get people who aren't just artists onto here so that they can talk about, other areas. I've had a few game designers, a few writers on here, and it's always great to see things from their other perspectives. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
And last but not least, Nic Boone, tell us a little about yourself and what you do and how you got into games and art in general.
Well, I got into games when I was a kid. I played most of the consoles from the NES onwards, and eventually I ended up going to school trying to figure out where I wanted to work in the game industry, because I always had a passion for storytelling and for games and film, and ended up subsequently dropping out of 2 schools. And now I just kind of freelance and am in pursuit of bettering my art and landing better work and making it better projects for myself. I ended up meeting a bunch of people in the game industry kind of on accident, and it has been just messy, but it's been really enjoyable. And I'm mostly interested in things like horror, and so that's kind of the angle that I've taken with these things.
Awesome. And you do lots of illustration and concept-y type stuff.
Yeah, I do a lot of stuff like that.
Yeah, that's really cool. So you've been focused on a lot of things like tabletop games and card games, right?
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of tabletop stuff and kind of card art, smaller companies that are getting their start, like Broken Egg Games. You know, it's something that I'm kind of angling out of, but I have a lot of appreciation for tabletop games, even though I haven't really gotten any experience playing them. I've always wanted to.
Well, this seems like it's going to be a pretty good introduction for that then. We don't necessarily have a tabletop here, but we do have all the makings for what we need. So we'll get into that in just a minute. Well, before we get into that, it wouldn't feel right to get some game developers together without talking about game dev related stuff. So at the start of all these shows, I like to ask a simple question about, what people do in game dev or, things that they like. Today, I'd like to ask you guys what some of the inspirations were for you guys to get into games. Caitlin mentioned things like Neopets. I know tons of my friends who played Neopets when they were younger. So what are some things that really pushed you to get into game development? I know that for me, it was kind of an accident. I found out that people actually made games, and I was like, well, how do they do that? And I went online and found out about things like Polycount, where they talk about making art for video games. Shortly thereafter, I played a lot of games that had the type of art that I was interested in making, like Team Fortress 2 and whatever. And so I kind of came in from almost like a modding angle. But what about you guys? What sort of pushed you into getting into games as opposed to something like film or any of the other creative fields out there? Crystal, would you like to kind of step into this? Because you might be approaching it from a different angle than the other three of us.
I'm not sure. It's not, it seems like all of us obviously are long time game fans, but I actually did career-wise, like I said, I did animation because I like to draw a lot. I kind of identified with what Caitlin was saying, making characters and doing the role-playing thing and making your own story. And whereas animation and film, are experiences you watch, games were something that I felt more a part of, being able where you're actually that person playing that part instead of somebody just watching something, watching it unfold on the screen. Mm-hmm. So for me, it was a lot. I did a lot of time in MMOs, World of Warcraft, the Gateway Drug. From there, lots of other MMOs, and it was that whole idea, and I guess that kind of ties into D&D, what we're going to be doing here, of having that power and getting that rush of creativity that you're making the character, you're making the decisions, your actions are affecting the world. And I think that's what kind of finally pushed like games to the top of my list over the other things. Not that I don't love them, but I found even after studying animation and working in Noman before I was working in researching games, all I wanted to talk about was games. And that's what I realized. I was like, maybe this is career-wise, maybe this is the next logical step for me. So that was kind of my path there.
Nic, Caitlin, what about you guys? What were some of the things that really pushed you to pursue games as opposed to some other field?
Well, for me, I really started getting invested in games, outside of things like Mario, when I encountered Silent Hill for the PlayStation, and I was way too young to be playing that at the time. But I ended up finding myself realizing that games had a lot more leeway in what they could say compared to a lot of other media. Even when it came off as like ham-fisted, Final Fantasy VII being a great example of that, there's a lot of potential in the ability to connect with characters or to create a universe that I think film and books have done before, but not to this kind of interactive extent. And so I got really invested in art by extension by looking at the concept artists for Silent Hill, like Masahiro Ida, and seeing a lot of how people were structuring their design sense or how they were approaching illustration or better yet, why, ended up getting me really interested in pursuing this as a career. And really, I had no idea that you could for a long time, and no idea about where I came from. Nobody even thought about these things as a job. And so when I went to school and met, you and Mitch and a couple of other mutual friends of ours, I ended up getting some good direction, and I've just kind of been moving on that. And yeah, that's what got me into games.
Awesome. Caitlin, what about you? What are some things, aside from, I guess, Neopets and, interacting with games like that sort of pushed you in this direction?
I swear I'm not just like pushing Neopets, but I think Neopets really gave, because I'm just thinking about all my friends from Neopets that I'm still friends with that did art with me. They're all professional artists now. Like, I have some people who are in biz dev, who went to CalArts, who are in animation. Like, I think that Neopets was really like the first community outlet that I had. Through that, then I went on to the dark depths of like DeviantArt, and then there was those offshoots of like Sheezy art, and I forgot what the other one was. But like from Neopets, we had this group of artists that we just kind of grew as we got older. And I always, it sounds so stupid. Like he said something like it earlier. Like, I didn't put together that you could do art for video games. Like, I played video games. I played lots of video games. Nintendo 64. I played Neopets, and it never occurred to me that you could pursue a career in it. So I never did until I was at IVC, and I was halfway to a psychology degree, and I hated it. And I was like, I had straight A's. I was doing good, but then I just couldn't read about psych on the weekends. Like, I wasn't into it. So when it came time to apply to UCI, I was like, I can't do this. I just can't. So I started looking around, and I live 10 minutes from Laguna College of Art and Design, and they advertise game art as like one of their main majors you could do. And I was like, oh my God, you can work on games? I'm going to be a concept artist. And of course I went and figured out I'm not going to be a concept artist. And then I tried 3D, and I was super bad at it. Did not get it, but I was asking so many questions. I specifically remember being in class, and I would cry before class because 3ds Max just did not click with me. And I would ask so many questions to the teacher that eventually stopped answering my questions because he thought I wasn't paying attention because nobody else was asking questions. And then suddenly this guy came up to me after class, Sebastian, and he told me, I'm so glad you're okay with looking stupid, because we literally all just wait for you to like ask all the questions in class because we don't get it either. I was like, you are such a dick, but thank you for telling me that, because I thought you either got 3D or you didn't. So I kept asking questions, and I survived that class with a C. But after that, I just started going to all these resources because I found out polycount was a thing. I found out YouTube had tutorials. I found out there was Linda and all this stuff. And now that I had all these resources to figure out how I was doing, I could actually make what I wanted to. And it was crazy. But before I came to this school and before I took the class, I had no idea 3D was a thing. So it's crazy how you can literally just fall into things. So yeah. I'm not entirely sure what I'm focusing on yet, because like I know I like organics, I know I like 3D environments, but so far my course of existence has been like I just kind of go with the flow, and you fall into it and find out how you like eventually. So I don't know. We'll see where I end up.
Oh, that's cool. And that for me, it's great hearing from people who come from different backgrounds, but also have different levels of experience in the industry or who are still students, because the more that I talk to a wide variety of people, especially who are getting into game development nowadays, where it's more accessible than ever, the more I see people coming from all kinds of wild situations and backgrounds that I never even would have considered. So it's, I wasn't into Neopets. I've never really been into things like concept art, even though I was a traditional artist for a very long time. But, hearing about, your guys' experiences and the variety of them is great to hear. So what are some resources that you guys would suggest, having either been in games for a while or who are getting into games? What are some things that you have found very helpful for yourself in your jobs that people might not expect even? Crystal, you got into more almost like the recruiting and human resources side of things after doing art. Is there something that pushed you into that you would recommend to other people?
That's a very interesting question because, like everyone said, it was something I kind of stumbled into. I just sort of found, like I said, my skills aligned because I don't feel like I was as badass of an artist. You know, it was something I did as a hobby. Yet obviously we're surrounded by these industry professionals who this is what they live and breathe and do every day. So it's weird. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to think about that because I feel like usually it's the other way around where people are trying to get into the art side and don't go into this. But I feel like with the HR stuff, there's a lot of understanding. Can I actually think about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Nic, what about you? You've been doing a lot of illustration. I've actually been following a lot of your progress on, your social media and stuff, seeing all the like paintings and stuff that you're doing, the dozens of paintings and sketches. What are some resources that you would recommend, having been doing all that intensive work over the past, say, year and a half or two, where you've just been like really digging in deep?
Man, well, thank you, by the way, for following.
Yeah.
I actually think one of the biggest things that I learned, to expand on something that Kate was saying, that about being a badass artist, because I wasn't. I think especially where I came from, the idea that anyone could be a badass artist was something that from a very young age people would tell me you were just born with. And when I went to college and didn't do well, there were things in my life that didn't go well, mixed with kind of the culture of a lot of the games industry, that got very toxic. I was so convinced for a while that it just wasn't in me. And what I discovered was that there is no such thing as it being in you. It's just a knowledge that you can learn like anything else. Anyone can learn anything. And to that extent, while this might not be the best advice for everyone, I would actually discourage people from pursuing college, especially for art, and instead dedicate their resources to things like ateliers and more foundational art learning, because you can apply those things to the things that you love, but not necessarily the other way around. And for me, I found that my biggest resources ended up being my friends. My buddy Mitch Malloy, and yours as well, has done a lot to help me and to help guide me to some good answers. And I kind of accidentally ended up learning from a comic book artist here, Brian Stelfreeze, and have been. It was just a complete accident, but I've just relinquished myself to the idea that if I wasn't a savant, then I should probably rely on knowledge instead. So I've just been trying to focus on being very analytical and thinking about, why and how, how to achieve a thing. And I definitely think that the amount of resources are out there, but having the self-compassion to be able to pick some up and set some down, or knowing why to use the tools that you use is probably really important for something like this. Yeah,
that's a very good point. I found in my own work that while I am not the best artist out there by any means, I found that I'm able to sort of keep up by being very analytical about the work that I do. So in a lot of cases, I've found that just doing lots of research and trying to break down all the work that I do into tiny little steps has always been a very useful tool to have.
Yeah, I definitely think that kind of granularity is something that will help anybody who tries it, because I think that the problem with a lot of learning and a lot of schooling right now tends to be, it's done because that's how it's always been done, rather than looking at something and saying, oh, well, it's done because that's how your eyes work. And your eyes, and there's a set rule, there's observable truths. that you can break down into very simple things instead of trying to do all this crazy, 80-hour work weeks for years on end. Just, focus on a small, attainable thing and just hit it and move on to the next one. So on and so forth.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What do you guys think about that? What do you think about taking that sort of approach?
If I can't, I think Nick touched on a really good point too about schooling and education and sort of being born with that gift as opposed to hard work. And it's like on paper, I have an animation degree. I have, graphic design degree on paper, but they were skills that I didn't keep up with. And so professionally, I'm just like, my skills are not as sharp as these people who practice every day. So I think it's a good point. If it's something you're passionate about, it's not necessarily, and also speaking as a recruiter, your university or your education isn't the first thing that I look at. I actually specialize at Naughty Dog looking at artist portfolios. And that's where my eye goes before the resume is I'm clicking that portfolio to look and see what you've done. Is this skill there? And then also what I thought was really interesting is, people at our studio, these incredibly talented artists, people are, a lot of people are afraid to apply, but they're also looking at potential and at talent. So maybe if you aren't even the biggest, artistically speaking or designer or anything, think you're a badass. If you have like potential and that shines through in like your application, your portfolio, people are going to see that and they're going to pick up on that. So I think, yeah, that's just as important. If it's something you want to do, practicing and not giving up and working at it and not just saying, oh, I don't have, the talent with it. I wasn't born with it. If you really like it, work at it and pursue it.
That's definitely a good point. I would have to echo. I would say that I'm probably the least formally educated person here, actually, because I never actually went to school for any of the stuff that I do. I do character art at Insomniac, and I'm working on this big game, and it's really cool. But I don't have any formal education, and the only way that I was able to get to the place I'm at is by pushing that work really hard and trying to have a good work ethic rather than pursuing things in, say, a school or something. So it's certainly possible. You just have to very clearly, apparently, find the path that works best for you to get, say, your portfolio or, whatever other job skills you will need to the place they need to be to get to the point where you can be hired.
Yeah, and just sorry, real quick.
Go ahead.
I'm not saying that art school is a waste of time. It's exactly what you just said. Different routes work differently for people. There are some schools and some teachers you can go and learn at and actually learn a lot. And some people might work well that way, and some people might work better not pursuing that goal. So you just kind of have to try it out, see what works.
Yeah, absolutely. Caitlin, what about you? I mean, I'm sure that you being in school, having done internships and stuff, you must have some way to weigh in on this, just from your own perspective and experience.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I haven't working on the job part and working on the graduating part, but it's like I keep hearing a lot of really good points, but then I'm also my opinion's kind of skewed because I love my school. Gavin Rich is the coolest guy ever. He's the chair of our department. And he's been in the game a long time. He knows his shit. He's like Buddha. He is the nicest, most humble, most talented artist I know. He's my papa. So I don't mind being at school. I mind the price tag, but that's kind of that's a bigger discussion. That's a bigger, entire education system in America discussion, whereas to me, I've paid $106,000 for 3 years. That sucks. But if we just completely ignore that, ignore the crippling debt, let's look at what I've learned and how quickly I have learned it. if you're not in school, chances are like you're in another job, because if you're in school, you can take loans and then take time off and just focus on school and have a part-time job to make some money. But the majority of your time will be spent at school. Mm-hmm. So that means the majority of your time will be spent honing these skills. But my friends that aren't in art school and are still working on getting the skills to where they need to be, they have like a fraction of the time to work on those skills that I do. And then there's always the like unexpected life stuff that happens. You get married, you have kids, somebody gets sick, get car accident. Like, there's just so many things that come up that I don't know how somebody would start and be able to get as skilled in 4 years as not necessarily me, but just like as any of the students at my school that were really like dedicated and applied in their studies, you know? So I still think there is a benefit to school. I think it allows you to be more focused and you're surrounded by people who are focused. And if it's a good school, you're being taught by people who have been focused for a very long time. And then you build connections. Like, there's benefits to school that I think kind of negate the debt sometimes. But
yeah, I think that's a very good point. And, you know, there are a lot of people who school is really the right environment for them to do their learning, right?
Definitely for me. I'm a perfectionist procrastinator. So I will keep noodling at things until it's perfect, which isn't smart because at some point you just got to hit a deadline, right? And school makes me have these deadlines. So it's like, finish projects quickly and just learn and then do another one, do another one, do another one. So for me, it certainly is better.
Mm-hmm. And that's great practice for when you have, you know, a full-time job and you have to just get it done as opposed to, you know, noodling around with it forever.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think it's just like, you have to do what works for you. I think the only reason I discourage it tends to be the price tag that you were talking about. But I think it's also knowing, at the end of the day, it's also knowing what you want out of art. And a lot of people, when they start, they don't entirely know. They have this, you know, kind of loose idea based off of the genres and IPs that they like, you know, rather than any intent for art. I think it takes a while to find that. So I mean, that's why I would recommend something like an Atelier. It's a little cheaper. It's a little bit more specific. But yeah, I definitely don't want to, you know, make people feel bad for having gone to school or enjoyed their schooling experience.
Definitely. Well, aren't there like LCAD? We don't have school in the summer because we're in a beach canyon, so it's just too much traffic. So during the summer, I'll do like CGMA. I did an introductory ZBrush course at Noman, which is only open to international California students online. So I think there's just so many options now, like online schools, which are significantly cheaper. And to me, at least the ones I've tried, they've been just as good. So I think there are other like more certificate versus degree-based options that to me, like if you're driven, you can just use that and you can go just as far.
Yeah.
Well, it's great. Thank you guys for, you know, expanding on this weird little question discussion thing. But I think that's a good place to sort of end the discussion, transfer into something a little more nerdy than talking about games and actually playing a game. How does that sound?
Oh yeah.
All right then. So with that in mind, let's go over the characters that you guys are going to be playing in our fun little game of D&D today, shall we?
Yeah.
All right. So once again, let's just go alphabetically. Caitlin, tell us about the character that you're going to be playing.
All right. So I'm kind of new to this, so I'm kind of going off of the character sheet you made, so I wouldn't mess it up. And we wouldn't have to spend lots of time fixing my boo-boos. So I just literally took your level 5 rogue player sheet that you filled out. And now I'm in Photoshop because I don't have a PDF viewer. So I'm taking the text tool and putting Rungier in the character name. So.
All right. Okay, so Rungier, the rogue.
Short, thief, charlatan.
Yeah.
That kind of dude.
Awesome. Sounds great. Crystal, what about you? Tell us about the character that you're playing.
All right, so I also went with one of your character sheets for simplicity's sake and picked a class I'm a little familiar with, not entirely, and that is Warlock. So I am going to be playing Embria, who is... Ooh, we're going to have a bunch of charlatans in this group, apparently. She's a half-elf charlatan warlock.
Awesome. And Nick, what about you?
I will be playing a human barbarian whose name is a literal grunt.
That's fantastic.
He has a love for dogs, is good at heart, but is just incredibly stupid. He's kind of deluded himself into believing that he is magic and has no actual use of magic, although he hates practitioners of the dark arts. So he's kind of a walking conundrum.
Well, that is awesome, and I think it's going to play quite well with a warlock in your party. We'll see how that plays out.
He also hates art in general.
That stood out to me.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Yeah.
That depth to have a deep backstory about how, like, when he was young, he wanted to do like those French cave paintings. He wanted to be like one of those painters. And then his parents were like, no, you have to be a barbarian. And so, like, he has like deep-seated hate for artists because he couldn't pursue his true passions.
He lived in the forest until the city expanded there, and they built a bunch of art museums where he used to live in the forest.
Oh, terrible.
Now he must burn them to the ground.
So many layers. See, your character, I don't know how to pronounce his name. How do I say it? Is like he has layers.
He's an onion.
Yeah.
Oh, that's perfect. Oh, I guess backstory-wise, I didn't really say anything. I got kind of like a broad idea, and I get maybe this will work actually well with Warlock's really interesting because, it's that whole, like, well, are they evil? Are they good? Or they're somewhere in between. So for Embria, I decided backstory-wise that the Warlock thing, she's tied in with a fiend, is going to be sort of like a family inheritance thing. So I think maybe almost like a Malfoy family type thing where family-wise, like, they kind of made this pact with the fiend and she was kind of born into it, but it's not really her thing. So even though, like, her source of magic is like a little bit on the darker side, her family's got like a little bit of a reputation. So tied in with like the charlatan background, it's something that she tries to hide. So it's almost like she's a half elf and she has this half duality. So like her human side, her family with the sorcery, but then like what she presents is tries to be more of the elf side, like light side, and is kind of trying to find her own way, like out of this pact, having to be tied to this fiend.
I love it. The Adventurers Guild. It's a very large guild. It stretches across multiple continents. It's a very rich guild with many very, very wealthy patrons. And it exists mainly because adventuring is, it can be a career for a lot of people. It's not exactly the most glamorous career, I guess you'd say, but it can be very, very lucrative, which is why an entire guild has sprung up around the idea. Now, lots of people find their way to the Adventurers Guild for lots of different reasons, but in general, it's because people happen to find themselves with certain skill sets that work well with certain problems. Now, being low-level members of the Adventurers Guild, you guys occasionally have to take on kind of the shit jobs, which is unfortunate. But it's necessary. You're only level 5, so you're certainly not going to be saving the world like those level 19, level 20 members. But occasionally, the guildmaster, a grumpier old gentleman named Bailey, comes to you one day, to your little group as you sit in the common room of the Adventurers Guild Hall, with a slip of paper in his hand, and he says, you folk, we've got some odd stuff happening out in the town of Wulfbridge. Now, I know that weird shit happens out there all the time, and it's probably nothing. It's probably just some weird weather. But they're willing to pay us to come out and have a look, so here you go. And he hands you a paper. He places it down on the table at which you guys are sitting, drinking your various beverages this fine morning. And As you pick it up, you see that it is a letter from the mayor of the small town of Wulfbridge, which is a couple days ride out from where you are. And it details how over the past few days, a dark cloud has settled above the city. Everything else around is bright and sunny. It's been very clear across the entire countryside, except above the town of Wulfbridge. At the bottom, there are details about promised payment to the Adventurers Guild, and by extension to you. As he hands you this paper, Bailey says, "I suggest you get moving, saddle up some horses, get what you need from the armory, and excuse me, and off you go." And he waddles his way back to his office, closes the door behind him, and you are left together to do what you please.
This sounds like sad magic. Rain, just rain.
It definitely has to be something magic related. Let's see. So you said, Xavier, Wulfbridge is just a couple days away, small town. Is there anything anything else we may know of this city, or is that something we'd have to roll to figure out?
Well, you might want to do a history check. So roll a d20 and add the number right next to your history skill.
Try this roll 20 thing out.
So I'm assuming 2 is not a good number.
A critical failure +1.
Alrighty. Yeah, you are unfortunately not very familiar with the town of Wulfbridge.
First time I've ever even heard of it.
Yeah, I mean, you might have heard that there was a town, off to the west outside of the city in which you are currently residing, the city of Villemire. But no, you've not actually been there. You don't know anything about it. But there are directions included with the letter. So if you needed to find it, you certainly could. It's a couple days travel by horseback. So, what would you guys like to do? Is there any preparation that you would like to make before you head out to Wulfbridge?
I think I'd like to get a raincoat because my character clearly believes that this is just going to be a case of rain.
Yeah, I guess since it's a couple days. So is it just horseback and whatever our characters are able to carry individually, right? Not like a cart type situation? Or
if you wanted to bring cart, you could probably go to the armory / supply room and requisition one if you wanted to.
Could I be a piece of shit and forge a document that gives us better armor and more money?
You can certainly try.
Because I certainly want to.
All right, yeah, you can certainly try that. That's going to be a you know what? We'll say that's just going to be a general intelligence check. So roll a d20 and add your intelligence modifier.
Did it roll twice?
Is it being weird? Let me see here. What's going on?
Because I'm seeing 2. It says 16 and 20.
Well, the last thing I see is a 20. I think you should.
I prefer the 20. But I don't want shenanigans.
From a critical failure to a critical
Right, and then I was looking at which
that'll just be your intelligence. So your above your intelligence score, there should be a small another one. All right, so yeah, so 16 plus 20, that's gonna be a 19. Yeah, you're actually able to you've probably done this a couple times before. Run this particular.
Let's see. I worry about the grunty one.
The waterproof down.
So I feel like he needs a helmet. I feel like he's gonna hit tree branches.
Okay, so are we making a helmet out of tree branches? What's the thing?
Like one of those metal caps, because you're barbarian, right?
Yeah.
So is it like WoW and stuff where certain classes are restricted to certain types of armor?
No, not really. Though there are restrictions on things like proficiency. If you haven't used something before, then you won't be proficient with it. But you being a rogue, you're pretty familiar with forging documents and that type of thing, which is why you're able to do that pretty well.
All right. So for him, I certainly want to get him like a shield or a helmet, because I don't trust him to attack it. So I need him to be able to defend at least.
I think I'll take a shield because my character is averse to clothing.
Okay.
There we go.
Well, sounds good. Now, keep in mind that depending upon your specific skills as a barbarian, wielding a shield might not actually be the greatest thing for you. It might impede you in your barbarian rage and such. So, just something to keep in mind. But if
a shield on my chest.
that might work. If you do want to use a shield, though, that will increase your armor class, which is how hard it is to hit you. It should increase it by 1, I believe.
Where is that?
That'll be at the top of your sheet, just off the middle on the right-hand side. It'll say armor class.
All right, so it'll raise it by 2, you said?
By 1, I believe. And I could be completely messing this up, but I don't care. We'll say it's +1.
Okay, so I'm now wearing a shield on my chest.
Awesome. So as you guys finish getting all your equipment together, you head out back to the stables. You grab your horses and start off on the way to the small town of Wulfbridge. And over the next couple days, you even if you had done a little bit of work before or such, working for the Adventurers Guild, you probably would have done a little bit of work together, but maybe not as much. And you get to know each other a little better over the next couple of days. And finally, after 2 days of travel in the crisp morning air, you find yourselves sidling up into the small town of Wulfbridge, and you turn along the path you're taking, and just beyond the hill, you can see the dark cloud hanging over the small town. It's a sort of billowing gray cloud that just seems to extend around the city limits. And while there's no rain falling, it definitely looks very gloomy in this specific area.
This appears to be sad magic, not rain.
Are we allowed to question local townsfolk for what's going on? Is that
Of course, yes.
there's a word for that, right? Like intellect checker.
Well, you can just say, I want to go and talk to somebody. Who do you want to talk to?
Let's talk to the local blacksmith, the person who forges the weapons, so that we can see if there's any baddies going around.
All right, cool. So I want you to do an investigation check. So roll a d20 and add the number next to your investigation skill. That's in the column on the left-hand side of your character sheet. You're trying to find out where the blacksmith is here in Wulfbridge, since clearly you've never been here before.
So it's 2 plus intelligence.
Yeah, 2 plus your intelligence modifier. So the number above the larger number in the
5.
intelligence. Yeah, so it's kind of tough to find the blacksmith, since most of the shops and buildings seem to be kind of closed up. Everybody's a little bit nervous, it seems, and the few people that you do see walking around the center of town, which is sort of a large crossroads with a fountain in the middle. The people you do see walking around seem to be nervous and going about things as quickly as possible so they can get home. You definitely see them glancing above to the gray cloud that's hanging above. Though a few hours of searching and knocking on doors later with very little effect, you do see that there is one building on the outskirts of town which has black smoke coming out of a chimney.
Seems like it might be a good direction to head.
Can I look around to see if there's anyone acting suspicious?
Sure, do a perception check.
What's the roll for that?
So roll a d20, and in that column where you have all your skills, you'll just add the modifier next to it, the little number.
All right, so I rolled a 14, and the little number is 4, so that is 18.
18. Yeah, So people are certainly acting a little bit strangely, just in general. The people that you see walking by, going from place to place, whether it's to a shop or going home from work or something, they all seem a little bit nervous. Though you get the impression that they're less acting suspicious and more just nervous about the fact that there's this cloud hanging over, and now there are some strangers in town, which is just making them even more nervous. Do you want to go to the building that has the smoke coming out of the chimney?
Let's, guys.
Yeah, that sounds good. Or is there perchance an inn that we may have passed along the way while we're searching for the blacksmith?
Yes, there actually was a pretty large inn towards the center of town, and there were some horses tied up outside. There was a tavern on the bottom level of the inn, and it looks like the inn is 3 stories high.
Do you both think we should perhaps check there to see if we can get some more information from the locals?
I think good.
All right.
Could I roll to talk I have an idea. We can go in the tavern, and my character, since he's like a really suave jerk, he can talk to one of the tavern girls and sweet talk her into giving him some information about what's going on around here. Can I roll for that?
Yeah. Do you want to go back to the inn?
Yeah.
I mean, it's all up to you guys.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm down.
Try the inn. Caitlin again. Sorry, what was your rogue's name again?
Rangier.
Got it. All right, so I think we're going to the inn. So we make our way over.
Okay.
Pop inside.
Yeah. So walking into the inn, it's quite warm here in the sort of tavern area down at the bottom, and as you enter, you can see that whereas outside there weren't a lot of people moving around, inside there are a lot of people packed in here. Most of the tables are full. There's a lot of talk going on. A few people look up to see you guys coming into the room, but it seems that most people here are just regular townies, just out getting a late breakfast, and there are a couple of wait staff going between different tables, taking orders, dropping off drinks. There's a bartender behind the bar, very very large, burly gentleman who seems to be balding. He's wearing a very stained apron, which he is currently wiping out a glass with.
All right, Rangier, I'm not sure how much your charms are going to work on the barkeep.
Yeah.
Try, or I can give it a try.
I feel like if I tried, I would get my ass kicked. So maybe you should go sweet talk him because you're a girl, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Also try by
You're much more beautiful than I am.
pulling the coin out behind his ear and telling him it's magic.
All right, so you want to just walk up to the bar and try to sweet talk this guy?
Yeah. Well, so Emery is gonna head up to the bar, try and kind of wiggle her way in between. Is it particularly crowded there, or just try and get her way up to the bar?
There are a couple. Contact. Yeah, there are a couple of open seats at the bar where you could probably just squeeze in there. Yeah.
All right, so yes, just trying charmingly to make eye contact with the barkeep and smile pleasantly until she gets his attention.
Okay, so it takes a couple of minutes. It seems that he's just not really paying attention. But then when he sees you out of the corner of his eye, he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry. What can I do to help you?"
Oh, that's all right. We are actually visiting town. We were sent by the Adventurers Guild to investigate what's going on here in Wulfbridge, and I was wondering if you might be able to help us with any information.
Oh, well, I heard they were getting some folks from the Adventurers Guild. I didn't think I'd be here so soon. What can I do for you?
Well, First of all, perhaps when did this strange cloud manifest over your town?
Oh, well, that was, it's been about 2 weeks now, I think, yeah.
And he actually shouts to one of the wait staff. It's a younger man, very very slim of build, young human. He looks to be maybe 20, 22, something like that. Waves him over and he's like,
hey, Nicky, come here. These folk are asking about the cloud. You know more than I do.
and the younger man comes over and he's like, oh, hello. What's going on? I'm sorry. What's up?
Hi, what was your name again? I'm sorry.
It's Nicky. Yes. You said something about the cloud.
Yes, we were actually sent here by the Adventurers Guild to investigate my.
Yes. Oh, yes. Right. Yes. I was just talking about this. Sorry. I get outside more than the barkeep here does. It's been quite a thing, and he actually ushers you guys over to a table to sit down and talk about it. And he starts explaining that over the past couple of weeks, the weather had started to get weird. There were weird breezes, and then one night there were sort of the sounds of thunder. And then when people went out the next morning, a dark cloud had just appeared in the sky. Yes, and it was terrible. All the folks around here, we're just so we don't really get we don't travel much, and we're not sure what is going on here. But we were hoping that you could help.
Can I question the relationship of the town to the nearby factions?
I suppose so. Yeah. Yeah. Well, how do you want to say that, or what do you want to do?
I'm probably just trying to figure out if there's
they have bad
like towns with mages. If it's if this magic is just some monster, or if it's a magic brewing from an enemy town or enemy faction,
yeah. Well, I don't think there's any angry mages or anything out there. Well, we don't really get many magical folk coming through.
I know I'm magic.
Oh, you do?
What? I'm magic.
Oh, well, that's amazing. I've never seen magic in person before.
I'm going to pull out a coin from behind his ear, but I'm going to do it in a very intimidating way, like standing too close to him.
Okay.
Not intimidating, scary, intimidating, you're getting way up in my personal space and I don't know what you do.
Intimidating, I really need him to believe that this is magic.
Is that his magicians, his distraction flourish is actually getting right up in your face?
Yeah. I just shake my head because, and explain to you that we didn't ask for him to come. He just kind of was forced to come with us.
Palming onto the side a little bit.
Yeah.
Just interrupt you. I kill deer. They like deer, I guess. I don't know.
Okay, Nick, I want you to do a sleight of hand check. So roll a d20 and add your sleight of hand skill.
I rolled a critical 1.
Yeah, so
plus 2.
Yeah, so yeah, as you are getting right up in Nicky's grill, reaches into his his little coin pouch and produces a coin, trying to hide it. Failing to hide it, but still trying valiantly, and just kind of slaps it against the side of the guy's head, and you're just here's a coin. Yeah, it's not convincing at all, but the guy seems so taken aback and so just terrified by what he is witnessing that he doesn't really know how to react. So he just he very nervously just claps his hands together. And he's like, that was good. Oh.
I just say, like, in a very flat tone, don't encourage him.
I'm just gonna give him a very wide smile and nod, like I bought that he liked it.
Okay,
You're
well,
pacified.
all right. Sorry. Now, there is something that I forgot to mention, and before he's able to finish his sentence, you guys all hear this crash from outside. It sounds like wood splintering, and there's this huge thump that actually rocks the tables. Everybody inside this room just goes completely dead silent, and people are like, "What the fuck was that?"
Does that happen a lot around here?
No, I don't know what that is.
Being small and reactive, I go and like hide in a corner to get away from the main group.
All
I
right.
think stuff is about to go down.
All right, great. So, what are Embria and doing?
I think I'm going to just walk towards the sound because my character, I don't know, he has no concept of danger, so he's just going to walk towards it.
All right.
Which this works great with our characters who are, I think, probably more like, let go in and like, we got your back. We got your back, bud.
It's like when you send out your pet to go take care of something first. And then if it takes out the pet and you see you're going to lose, you just run away while the pet dies.
Actually, I have this feat where like I've traveled a lot in the wilderness. So do I recognize this noise at all?
You recognize that it sounds like a huge crashing noise, like something just fucking broke. Do you want to go outside and see what's going on?
Yeah, I'm gonna walk out there.
Yeah, so as you walk out the door, you just kind of like push through these tavern doors and see that in the middle of the street there is the remains of a cart that was being pulled behind a horse. The horse which has now bolted away from it, and there is a guy standing next to the remains of this cart, which is smashed under a gigantic boulder that's probably 4 or 5 feet high, and he's like holding his head and just like, so he doesn't know what to do. He's like, he's got his hat in one hand and he's like, why?
Can I walk over and take the boulder off of his wagon?
You can certainly try.
All right.
Yeah, go over there. As you go over there, you like roll up your sleeves and flex a little bit. Do a strength check to try and move this huge boulder.
All right.
And as this is going on, I move to the door and just kind of peek around the corner, try to see like if something's gonna pop off or not, or like what is going on here.
Yeah, Embry's outside, kind of closer to the door. From where she can stand, I mean, does it appear that this boulder just kind of fell from the sky? There's no rocky outcropping nearby?
Do a perception check.
Also, I rolled a 6, and then my strength is +3 to 17.
So you shuffle up to this boulder and you push and you push and you can't move that shit at all. It is stuck. That thing must weigh at least a ton.
So Embry got a nat 20 on perception +1.
All right. Yeah. So as you're looking around, just trying to be very observant, the town of Wulfbridge is it exists between 2 large hills, but they're very gently sloping hills. It's kind of in a very shallow valley. So there is absolutely no place that this rock could have fallen from except straight above. And looking up there, you see a little bit of movement up in the cloud that just sort of flashes away before you can actually get a bead on exactly what it was.
What the?
Is it raining rock?
I think it is raining rock, or there's something up there in that cloud that
Yeah.
perhaps...
I'm sitting there looking around like bewildered, like looking in the sky and just seeing a cloud and be like, did a monster drop this? Like, I don't know what's happening right now.
All right. So as you guys are standing there trying to figure out exactly what the hell happened, you hear another crash, except this time from directly behind you, inside the inn. And it's an even more cacophonous crash than before. I want you all to do perception checks, every single one of you.
All right.
20, right?
Yeah, so roll a d20 and add your perception modifier. So that's going to be in the same column that you've been looking at before.
6.
11 for embryo.
All right.
I'm at 19. 16 plus 3.
All right. So, Rungier, looking around and sort of looking up to where Embria was pointing before, up in the clouds, happens to catch sort of a wisp of this cloud, which seems to have extended downwards and then gone back up into the cloud. And as this wisp is coming back up into the cloud, you just barely hear what sounds like very deep laughter, like a and looking behind you inside the bar, it appears that another one of these boulders has crashed through the 2 upper stories of the inn and landed square into the table that you guys were sitting at before.
That is so rude.
It's not very funny.
Huh.
So as you guys are standing here pondering this, there is a sort of shout from down the street and around a corner on the main road, and you turning in that direction, you see that there's a guy coming from around there, and he is actually holding in his arms a very large green shape that looks like a bean. Like a kind of like string beans or a green bean, maybe even something closer to like an edamame pod, and he's just like running towards the inn that you guys are at, and he's like, "Look at this thing! Look at this! You guys, look at this! There's more!"
Where on earth did you find that?
It dropped from the sky. He actually like skids to a stop in front of you, and he's like, "There are apples too. There's an apple the size of a pumpkin. It fell in my yard."
Can I sneak around and check to see if other stuff fell? If this is all just like fruit and vegetables, or if there's like something weird going on?
You want him to take you back there?
I want to do it stealthily.
Oh, okay. So just like going back to where he came from and trying to avoid.
Like,
okay.
They can deal with what's going on here, and just like without saying anything, I'm just flipping around and investigating what's going on.
Yeah, sure. Do an investigation check. See if you can figure out exactly where this guy came from.
That's also a D20.
Yeah. So roll a D20 and add your investigation modifier in that same column.
So that's 13 plus 6. That's 19.
Yeah, so it's pretty easy to see where the guy came from. He, as you kind of just casually walk over there, making sure that nobody's following you, you peek around the corner. You can actually see that this guy comes. He must have come from the. There's a house just down at the end of this, or along this road. It's just off to your right as you turn the corner, and you can see that it's actually just surrounded by a nice picket fence. It's a very nice little cottage, and in the front yard there are a couple of fruit trees, but you can see that there's actually a couple of large fruits, a huge apple that's once again the size of a good sized pumpkin. There are there's what looks like a head of cabbage that's like the size of a beach ball. There's all kinds of stuff, and along with it, there is this large bowl made of ceramic material that's shattered. It looks like this bowl was holding all of these different fruits and vegetables, and it just sort of fell from the sky.
I'm convinced that this is some kind of dark art and don't want anybody to eat it. So I'm just going to express to him that he shouldn't even be touching it. He should just drop it.
So as he's holding this big seed pod thing, he's like, oh my, and he drops it into the mud. And as it drops into the mud, one end of it splashes in a puddle, and the end that splashes into the puddle immediately splits open. And from this sort of seed pod bean sort of arrangement, this vine immediately starts to grow out of the puddle, and it grows astonishingly quickly. It's over just a couple of seconds, it's already 6 feet tall and getting taller, and it's extending vines outward on the ground along it. There's this just huge leafy vine that's starting to grow.
Can I attempt to cut it before it grows with my hand axe?
Sure, go for it. Do an attack roll. So roll a d20, and you'll add. There's a box down at the bottom of your sheet that has information on your attacks. So there will be a two hit. You'll add that to the d20 roll.
All right. So my 2 hit is +6. And my roll was 13. There's also a roll on the 2 hit. Should I be rolling for that?
Yeah, don't worry about it. You definitely hit this thing. So with your hand axe, I believe that's, what is that, a D? Does it say D6? I don't know.
Yeah, the damage is 1d6 +3.
All right. So yeah, you're gonna roll a D6 to get the actual damage on that hit, and then add your +3.
9.
All right. So yeah, as you just walk up to this thing, you just take a whack at it, and the hand axe cuts through really easily. It's like how new vines are very supple and soft. It's that same sort of idea. It's just really thick, and you just whack the tip of it off. As soon as you do, it's actually sprouts 2 more vines that start to grow up from the severed part. It seems to be growing incredibly quickly.
I don't say anything, but make a loud series of worried-sounding grunts with the other 2 members of the party.
I go into the tavern. I run back and see this going on. I go into the tavern, grab one of the lit candles, and proceed to try to burn the vine.
Okay. Yeah. As you take this candle out and hold it up to the vine, it does burn a small section of it, but because it's such a new vine that's so wet, it doesn't really want to burn very well.
All right. Embry is gonna look at. Let's see. Rangier and kind of like hold her hand out to just sort of gesture to wait while this vine grows, and just kind of keeping her eye looking up on the sky where she saw the movement before.
Mm-hmm.
And then just motioning to both of them, kind of like waving them a little bit closer and pointing up. And she says, "There's something up there. These things didn't fall from nothing. Something is up there, I believe, deliberately causing this stuff to rain from down here. We need to find a way to get up there and see what it is."
I kind of nod my head, although I'm very worried looking at this rapidly growing vine.
All right. So what do you guys want to do?
I'm gonna do whatever she just said.
Yeah, at this point, I'm just scratching my head, so I back off and go behind her and just kind of let her take her lead on this point.
All right, so
my skill set isn't one for just challenging this vine.
Yeah.
How high up now is this vine growing, and like how large?
It is growing incredibly quickly. By this point, it's over 10 feet tall, and it's getting much thicker at the base. It's sort of extending roots into the ground, kind of tearing the ground up a little bit as it goes. But it seems like the roots are getting deeper and deeper, and the base of the trunk is already about a foot wide and getting noticeably thicker as it goes.
Okay. Regarding like all the giant fruit and stuff, man. I'm just trying to think character-wise. Is there, I guess, maybe like an insight or another history check where she could see if she's...
Did we question the presence of giants?
Yeah, we haven't. Not out loud, we haven't.
Yeah.
Have I ever encountered a giant in my travels?
I want all of you to do a history check for your various things that you're wondering about.
All right.
History is not my strong suit.
All right, so I'm at 15.
Okay.
I'm at 11.
Okay.
I got a 3.
So Embria really doesn't have any idea exactly what would be going on. I mean, clearly there's something up there. There's something making shit fall. Nic hasn't really encountered anything like giants before, though. From things you've heard, from stories you've heard, sometimes giants do live in clouds and high places and such. Rungier would have heard that giants certainly grow large produce and stuff like that, though you're not really certain if this is exactly what that is. I mean, it would fit the description.
All right. Just looking. So the people I assume at the inn are still kind of. Are they still there? Have they kind of scattered in their houses?
A lot of them have been leaving, though some of them seem like they're too scared to leave. They're like looking kind of in amazement at this rock and like looking up through the ceiling, through the hole that's just been slammed through this building. The barkeep, you can hear him muttering and being like, how am I going to fix this? But a lot of other people have left. Yeah.
Okay, well then, just to the barkeep, then Embry's going to ask, has this has never happened before since this cloud formed? Is this the first time things have started raining from the sky?
He's like, oh, no, I don't know any. This is way beyond anything that I know. Oh my God.
Was that laughing earlier coming from the clouds? Could we tell?
That's the way it sounded. Yeah. It was sort of almost like an ambient thing, but I mean, it would make sense if it came from the cloud.
I think I'm going to say to the party, I think Cloud laugh at us. How we get to Cloud?
All right. So this vine is still growing, right? It hasn't finished doing.
Yeah, it's still growing. It's growing very quickly.
So I turn to Embria and I say, I have an idea. I am small. Maybe I can go on this. And first off, is it growing up or is it just growing?
Oh yeah, it's definitely growing upwards. There's a main stalk that's growing up, and then it has some that are kind of branching out, some that are kind of drooping back down to the ground and snaking outwards. But the main thrust of the movement is up. Yes.
All right. I turn to her and I say, this might be a stupid idea, but what if I wrote it and see if it reached the cloud? What would happen? What would happen?
I think it's worth finding out.
All right. So do I have to roll to jump on this vine?
Not necessarily, though. If you want to stay up on there, you'd have to do an athletics check to maintain your grip while this thing is, winding its way up into the sky.
Okay. So should I do that athletics check now? Because that's my intention.
Yeah, sure. Go for it. So roll a d20 and add your athletics modifier. That'll be in the same column as before.
Oh, shit. Okay, so that's a whopping 4.
So as you run to grab onto this vine and kind of hold onto it as it's going upwards, it's it's tough to hang on to because the way that it's actually growing and moving is almost like holding onto a snake that's sort of trying to wiggle away from you. And occasionally small vines will like grow and try to wrap around your hands, and you're just like, God. And you just unintentionally slip off of it and fall flat on your back.
Let me try. I'm going to do the same thing, except for I'm just going to like hug it, bear hug it.
All right, go for it. So roll a d20 and add your athletics modifier.
I help Rangier up.
So I have an 8.
An 8. It takes you quite a while to actually find a good spot. And as you feel like you get a good grip on it, but then it's starting to the width of the trunk of this thing is starting to expand more and more, and you realize I just can't keep a grip on this thing, and you fall off. You can't just bear hug it because it's getting too thick. So you go up like 2 feet, and your strength just gives out, and you fall back down.
I am very defeated and worried looking at this thing.
Let's see. So Emery wants to check our nice fancy equipment that Rangier procured for us and see if we can find anything that might help us more easily ascend this vine, like some rope, or see what else we've got.
Yeah, you definitely have some rope with you. You would have some basic climbing tools, like pittons and other things that you can drive into cracks in wood. You'd probably have at least one grappling hook, something fairly small. So you could probably use some of that equipment to affix it to this vine and see if you could ride it up or something.
Okay, so I'm gonna dig out that equipment and kind of set it down between Mora and Rangier and I to kind of sort out and see what we might be able to make use of. I think Emery's gonna try tying a rope around the stalk, like something with enough space where she could kind of get in between. Like use it to kind of like hold her, I don't know what that term is called, but I've seen it. I've seen like lumberjacks, kind of like they have that little thing they wrap around to help.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Like kind of like wrapping the rope around your waist and then throwing it around the tree to kind of shimmy up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Something like that, just to help make it easier and try and do, I don't know how to affect, something that's going to help that way, something to help climb up.
Okay, sure.
Really right.
Yeah, do an intelligence check for me.
Uh-oh.
Just to see if you can get this sort of thing working for all three of you. I mean, you've got the general idea, but...
11.
So it takes... there are a few false starts, and it takes you about half an hour just to get this sort of harness working for just you. But once you have it figured out, you're all able to kind of put the pieces together as a group and be like, oh, this is how we can do it for everybody. By the end of this, hour and a half process that you go through, there's actually a small group of villagers that have come by to just kind of watch what you're doing kind of curiously. And, in this time, the vine has grown to be over 50 feet tall and getting taller, and it's becoming very wide at the base. It's at this point it's over 6 feet wide at the base and slowly getting larger and a little more almost woody at the base. It's less like a vine now and more like a thick tree, though it still has kind of a smooth surface. You're finally able to get something together that will kind of work to shimmy yourself up.
And then maybe use the pittons to assist. Okay, so
yeah.
Rangier, do you want to go first? You being typically the most nimble.
Of course, my ego is wounded. I have to redeem myself.
Of course.
All right.
So, roll.
So do another Athletics check, this time with advantage. So roll twice and take the higher of the two.
Shit. Okay. So that didn't work out, but let me check my stat. That's plus athletics.
Yes.
So that would be 10.
Okay, that's just what you needed. You start slowly,
God.
just barely inching your way up the trunk of this thing. And it takes a few minutes for you to sort of hit your stride, but eventually you're like, oh, this is how I can angle myself and my hips to, get this loop around. And you sort of manage to climb up and hold yourself up there by holding onto vines that are springing out almost like branches and by using this rope. It's tough going, especially since the thing is still kind of moving upwards and expanding outward, but you kind of get into a rhythm after a few minutes. All right, who's up next?
Emery is going to turn to and say, do you mind if I go next? No offense, but if you fall, I don't want to be the one underneath.
I'm just going to kind of nod, but continue to look worried. I got like that worried dog look looking at this giant vine now.
All right. So
okay, Emery is going to kind of like give him a little pat on the arm and try and offer a reassuring smile. It's going to be okay. And yeah, it'll be okay. Trying to be convincing.
just worried,
trying to convince herself along with him.
All right. Well, in that case, do a persuasion check.
Not persuasive.
Managed to get a negative on that.
Whoa.
Wait. Yeah. Hold on.
There we go. Yeah. That it's.
Four.
You're not being incredibly persuasive there, unfortunately. He seems to be still quite worried.
I'm just gonna start climbing.
Okay, well, Embria,
watching all this stuff going down, face palming.
Embria, do an athletics check. This time, once again with advantage, just like Rungier.
Well, okay, that's better.
Yes.
Better. I'm sorry. What was it?
Athletics. Yeah.
That's a -1, so a 12.
All right. So yeah, you actually don't have quite as much trouble as Rungier did. Probably because you saw the technique that they were using and are able to kind of figure out how it's going to work for you. But you do start working your way up the trunk of this big vine. All right.
You did the climbing equivalent of like opening the jar. It was like, oh, you got it started for me.
Yeah. All right. That just leaves to start climbing up this thing.
All right.
So do an athletics check and do it with advantage. So roll twice and take the higher of the two. And they're both the same.
So 13 total.
Oh, well, yeah, you actually do manage to make it pretty well, even better than the two folks before you. Seeing what they were doing, you do exactly the same thing. They really loosened that jar, metaphorically. So yeah, you guys slowly start working your way up this this growing vine that's almost turned into a gigantic tree. And as you work your way up, slowly, ever so slowly, making your way up there, you can see it growing ahead of you up into the cloud. Now that you're actually up here, you can see that the cloud is very low over this town. It's only about 100 feet up, and you're getting much closer to it. You can see the gray mass of it coming towards you. And as you climb up, getting higher into the air, being able to now view the entirety of the town of Wulfbridge below you, you hear once again, We had some good discussion at the beginning as well. Really enjoyed it. This time I actually want to ask a more of just like a taste question, actually. What are some things in games that you guys, as people who are either in the industry or working to get in the industry, are things that, as someone who focuses on this type of stuff all the time, kind of bug you? Whether it's in a game or with the presentation of a game, something that you actually are working in your work to try and change. Now, that could be, say, if you were a game designer and you didn't like a specific mechanic in a game, maybe in your next game, you don't want to include that mechanic. Maybe you want to plan around not having that mechanic, or maybe there's a stylistic thing in visuals or any number of things. What is something in games or the game industry that you as an individual are sort of working to try and change for the better? Does anybody want to jump in? I have some stuff prepared if you don't.
I definitely. Okay, so I'm not, obviously, I'm not 100% defined on what my craft is, but I know for sure I'm not a character artist. In my school, it's like you go, the way it's set up now, it's like once you hit junior year, you decide, do you want to learn rigging and character topology and character stuff, or do you want to learn engine stuff and like how to do lighting and how to do like trim sheets and stuff like that? So I went the environment route. So I take this with a grain of salt because I also don't really know what I'm talking about in that sense, but horses in games. I can get over the fact that sometimes their anatomy might not be right because, one, I don't know what goes into the rigging of them, and two, I don't know what goes into the baking down process of rigging them. So it bothers me, but I'm also kind of like, but that could just be a game thing, so I don't want to give people shit for that. What does bother me, though, beyond any, like, when people make bridles and they put a bit and they show it in the horse's mouth, but they put the reins on the loop by the ears.
So just,
Do they do that?
Yeah, that's weird. Wow.
Like, I've seen that in multiple games.
Oh no.
Like,
Oh dear.
they don't show reins, and I'm guessing that's just like a poly issue, or it just doesn't look good. And that's fine. Like, I get that. But when people go through the effort of putting the bit in the horse's mouth, which is pretty much your steering wheel, the horse learns to follow the pressure of wherever you're pulling on the mouth. So for it to be by the ear, I'm just, why?
Yeah, that's pretty bizarre. And that, speaking as somebody who that would be the person to make like a horse or something, that type of thing is exactly what really freaking bothers me as well, is like people not really doing their research very well. It's hard for me to answer this question too, because I realize I'm a student, and like I said, I don't get what goes into it, but like, so I don't want to speak to literally anything else except for this, because this I just do not understand. I do not know how cars work. So if I were to make a car, it would probably look really dumb and not make any sense. So I kind of get that on the anatomy front, because it's like skin deep. I have never found a picture of a horse in real life with a bridle on and reins, where someone attached the reins up there when they went through the trouble putting a bit down there. Yeah, that's
There's
really bizarre.
No real life reference of that, so I don't get that.
Well, it's funny, like you say, it boils down to doing your research of, what the subject matter is. Like this, like you said, if you're not a car person and you're going to model a car, obviously you would hope people go and find reference. And it's funny that you brought up the horse thing as far as just like kind of things that sort of nitpick at, because I'm from Arizona, and what drives me nuts is whenever I see a game that's supposed to be set in a desert, and it has saguaros in it, which is a pretty iconic cactus. But the thing is that they're indigenous and native only to the specific area of the Sonoran Desert.
Mm-hmm.
So, in the background. Okay, sorry. And so since it's just such an iconic thing, I feel like it's kind of a go-to. People like, oh, I'm making a desert, I'm going to throw this in there. But like someone who grew up there, knowing like, no, these don't exist in California or Texas or these other desert areas. So like little things like that, it takes you out of the realism of it.
Definitely, and it's like, where do you draw the line then between I've done my research and this doesn't make sense, but this is a like imaginary world. So
I gotta mirror what you guys said about reference too. That's like a huge thing. that's a problem because like knowing how true to be to your reference versus like making something look good is like a pretty consistent problem, and it creates a lot of total unfocus. So there's a lot of designs right now that I'm seeing, and a lot of like ways that we're structuring stories, even where there's no functionality to the things that we're saying. They're just kind of shrapnel placed on things.
Are you talking about like visual design, kind of like the Michael Bay Transformers?
Yeah, and that just it goes over to everything now. It got really big in concept art a few years ago, and it's just been everywhere. I mean, and the differentiation between something like that where it's meant to be a cartoon, and it doesn't need to function, versus like believability or just something that looks nice because everybody just has this crazy spiky shit all over them for no reason. Or like little lights that just glow randomly on the back of your leg. Just very weird stuff like that. There's a lot of strange inconsistency as to like, well, why would there ever be a light there?
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that as a character artist, especially the weird lights thing. I always remember looking at like the Splinter Cell games and thinking, why does this main character, who's supposed to be almost completely invisible all the time, have bright green lights on his head? which I mean, people have brought it up again and again, but I still have to laugh at it. What about some other things that you guys are trying to sort of inject into your careers in the game industry? One of the things that I like to do when, for example, I'm doing this Dungeons and Devs stuff is to try to reach out to a diverse group of people. And one of the things that I've specifically been trying to do is getting not just people from different jobs, but also people from different backgrounds, or having men and women on these games, so that they can offer perspectives that are different from what we usually hear, which is just a bunch of white dudes saying white dude stuff on big stages surrounded by other white dudes. That's something I've been trying to do, is get more women on here so that these women have more visibility, because that's a problem in a lot of the game industry. What are some things along those lines that you guys are trying to do with your work, or the things that you are doing with your career that you're trying to, I guess, affect change in the game industry through? I
mean, for me, I'm definitely like trying to get people. Something I want to see more of is just more thought. I think that a lot of people just don't think about why they do a thing or why they believe a thing. And I think getting people thinking about anything will make them question, why they end up coming to the beliefs that they do. And so like, I see a lot of problems in the industry. So I think what I want people to think about is like the nature of how we structure, our relationships with other people, and, foster a little bit more goodwill in having conversations that aren't meaningless either.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Do you think that there is a lot of room to do that in things like illustration and concept art, where you try to provide different viewpoints or show different things than people are used to?
Oh, totally. I think one of the things is like knowing why you design the things that you do, or why you make the art that you want to make. Because like the amount of boob windows that I see, for instance.
Oh boy, yeah,
yeah. Like it doesn't make any sense. And I think even calling into question something like that through your art, or doing things that are a little bit more unexpected, or a little bit, eerie, where you might look at a piece and see one thing, and then upon looking at it for a couple more seconds, notice something else that's contrasting, might help somebody getting to think about this. So I think it's it's a lot about like the consistency of what you do. I think. So I think it's definitely possible. I don't think it's going to be easy because we have to balance some of the stuff against the capitalism. So there is that. But yeah, I definitely think that it's possible. It's just a matter of finding a way to better apply that, and also being a white dude myself, not trying to take the forefront of everything, and like being conscious about my own privilege and letting other people speak for once.
Mm-hmm. Crystal, what about you? You're in a unique position with this type of thing where you're looking at people to actually hire. Are there practices that you're trying to put into place to sort of amplify some of the voices who might not have voices, or trying to is there anything you're doing in your own work to try and push your workplace to be something that you feel maybe more welcoming, or something along those lines?
As far as me, like, this is my first studio that I've worked in, and I've found that I was very surprised by both how many people we have from so many different cultures and all over the world at Naughty Dog, which is pretty incredible. I can go into the kitchen and hear different conversations in Portuguese, Korean, Japanese, just all kinds of things. And I think that's really great. And I know maybe not many studios are I'm not really, that's the thing. It's hard for me to say. I haven't worked at a lot of different studios, but it was just one thing I noticed, and I think is a great culture, having all these different people. I think the presence of females and everything in the industry, of course, it's very commonly said that it's a very male-dominated industry, and there are a lot more, males versus female ratio. One of the things I think is great are initiatives for younger women, like Girls Make Games, and I also know there are things like Girl Scout troops that have like game design programs, and kind of like what Caitlin and Nick touched on. When all of us kind of first started out, we weren't really entirely sure this is like a career that we could have, and I think with how cultures change, that's something people are getting more aware of now at a younger stage, and also being aware of all the different opportunities, not just art, but programming and design, and sort of working with one of my goals that I'd like to be able to do when I have time is work more with like students and universities and those younger groups like Girls Make Games and Girl Scouts, to just make it like voice and awareness of like, this is an industry you can be in. And there's all these different areas that you can focus in, whether you're artistic or technically minded, or if you're into administration and HR. So I think that area is just kind of like raising awareness, so less people kind of like us. Maybe it's like a generational thing. We kind of grew up with games, and we weren't really as aware at the time because it was such a younger industry. But now that it's growing and flourishing, there's so much opportunity there.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's always great to hear about things like Girls Make Games and how scout troops and such are trying to encourage young people into creative careers like this, because not everybody wants to be a doctor or a lawyer or something. And like you did mention, this seems to be an industry that's currently heavily dominated by men in lots and lots of different roles. So it's I think it's great to see that those changes are happening, because I certainly want to work with more women, because they always provide me with a lot of interesting feedback and perspectives. Caitlin, is there, aside from things like horse bridles and that type of thing, is there something that you feel like as a student you are going to be able to bring to the industry, and something that you're working towards that you want to try to either change or maybe shift for the better?
I don't really know, because I don't think any one person is going to be. I think the issue is much deeper than one person can change. I think it's just being an active advocate for the change. And eventually, like, as I've been going to school, I've seen slowly every single semester more and more women sign up. And I think it's just over time, as we just keep talking about it and we keep encouraging women to go and pursue this, it will change, if that makes sense. I think that it's not something I can do besides be an advocate and be, just a good member of the community. And I think that's just what we all should do. Just welcome all the new women that are coming in, new minorities. Don't be hostile to the men that are in the community, but just make space for women. I think there's space for everybody here.
I think that's a really good point, because you don't necessarily need to be like hostile to change something. You can just be welcoming, right?
I read I'm really into makeup. So right now a big issue in makeup is that there's all this makeup with different shades of beige, but there's like only if a foundation line has 30 shades of beige to accommodate white women in all their varying shades, there's only like 2 or 3 for black women, when they all have different undertones. There's like a million different varieties in black skin, just like there is white skin. There's nothing in between. Like, it's a huge issue in the community right now. And I was listening to a woman who works in the community, and she was talking about people of color in the industry and talking about how the best thing an advocate can do is just give love and support. And she feels like a lot of people that aren't people of color get really uncomfortable with the movement, because if you're not being oppressed, do you just fall under the category of oppressor? Which isn't true, but that's what a lot of people get scared of. Mm-hmm. So I am very glad that this conversation is happening. But I think that that's the attitude a lot of people have. It's like you're either the oppressed or the oppressor, where you can just be, comfortable and welcoming. I think the biggest thing is I think a lot of people are worried what all these other people are going to do for their success. And like, it's kind of almost gatekeeping in a way. I think that's where some of the resistance comes from.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's interesting. The conversation and a lot of the weird mores that people have around that, like the sort of gatekeeping type of conversation. Yeah. And in a way, it's kind of unfortunate, because there are a lot of people who I've met who are so afraid of that they don't want to say anything, as opposed to just trying to say something positive, because they've never even been exposed to people who are just trying to be positive. I find that really unfortunate. But I
remember somebody saying, just in the midst of conversation with, about just like, just how to be a good coworker. And one of them was like, don't gossip, don't project that. If someone starts gossiping to you, just respond with something nice about the person that they're talking about. And it just completely disengages them. So I think if you see someone or hear someone in the industry like being negative in that space around you, just do your best to change, to just be positive, and just don't let that continue. And I think the more people that come in and discontinue those ideologies about not including women, not including minorities, gatekeeping, the more we have people against that idea, the better it'll be.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Is there anything else that you guys wanted to add to this discussion before we get back to doing some goofy D&D stuff?
I mean, the only thing that I can even think of, especially in regards to the gatekeeping thing, is just like trying. Because I have no idea how to begin to even do this, but like just trying to, foster some compassion for students and for other professionals, and like seeing why somebody does a shitty thing, and also not letting them get away with it.
Right.
And so like when I see a lot of the gatekeeping out there, it usually has come from people who aren't at the top. They're not these very skilled artists. They're just very well known who got there, fairly recently. And I think being able to to just be aware of that and to not, foster that kind of toxicity once we achieve our success is ends up being very important. And I think a lot of people just don't even consider it.
Mm-hmm.
I think people fight so hard for that success that when they finally attain it, they're protective of it. So.
Yeah.
I think that was a very good phrase that you used, Nick, that fostering compassion, because it's such a simple thing that you can do, really. It's you try to be compassionate to other people and see where they're coming from, and by extension they will just almost magically start doing the same thing in a lot of cases. I think that's a very good thing to keep in mind. It's something that I sometimes fail at, but that I try to do.
Definitely.
And I've found that it's done a lot more to, help win me friends and have interesting conversations than anything else has.
Yeah, I definitely think, by contrast to like having hatred or contempt for all of the shitty things that I went through in school, or that, hearkening back to a time that you had a teacher who tells you, oh, well, you're never going to succeed, you should just give up. Hate is like jet fuel. It burns really bright. It'll get you really far in the short term. But in the long term, the sustainable fuel ends up being compassion. So like looking at people like that and seeing, well, yeah, what they did wasn't okay. What they said wasn't okay. But, knowing why they would do that is based out of fear and insecurity, helps better deal with your own, because you will have it at some point.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. Well, on that note, on the note of trying not to be terrible to people, let's get back into D&D, shall we? Does that sound good?
That sounds great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So, just to recap, you guys, our intrepid adventurers, were climbing up some manner of beanstalk up into the clouds.
Some manner of beanstalk.
Yes, some stalk of beanishness up towards this gray cloud hovering over the small town of Wulfbridge. And as you approach the bottom of this cloud, this mist overtaking you as you climb higher and higher, with the beanstalk going farther and farther up into the sky, you hear a low rumbling laugh.
I've got a bad feeling about this.
That's no moon.
So, what would you guys like to do now that you are entering into the lower parts of this cloud? Is there anything? Or would you like to just keep climbing?
All right, I just need a motivation check, because my character's bravery is directly linked to how much money he's making for his tasks.
Wow.
What was the reward for doing this again? Was it like hefty, or was it like, here's $5?
No, it was pretty hefty. The total reward would be to split among the three of you and the Adventurers Guild. So the Adventurers Guild would take a quarter of it. The total was going to be 200 gold. So you would each get 50 gold, which is pretty good. A standard wage for, say, somebody working at, say, like a mill or a tannery or some other regular job usually gets about $1 a day. So that's a pretty good, hefty amount of money for just a couple days' work.
Okay, cool. So I am very motivated to go up this beanstalk.
All right.
So I hear the roar, and I'm like, not excited about it, but I want to keep pressing forward.
Okay.
I'm going to roar up and attempt to inhale the cloud, because I think that the cloud is bad, but if I can breathe it all away, we're all good.
All right.
Problem solving skills.
Yeah, that okay.
I was going to ask about how far away are we from like the actual cloud to where we're, so like where we're climbing at right now on the beanstalk and how much farther we have to go?
I would say that Runjir is just entering the misty bottom of it now, with you maybe 20 or 30 feet behind. It's almost like descending into fog, like a very thick fog. If you were going to walk down a hill into a valley, it's just flipped upside down like that. So it's probably, there's a transitional area of maybe 30 feet where things start to get hazy, and then after that it would just be fully inside the cloud.
Okay, yeah. Embry is just going to keep climbing up with her eyes focused on what's ahead of her.
All right, great. And is Runjir feeling at all motivated by the roar from below her, in addition to the deep rumbling laugh from above?
Let's see what's in my gear. I have nothing I can dispose of. I was just going to throw something at him really light just to make him shut up. I have ball bearings. Maybe I can just throw one at him just to make him like snap out of it and pay attention.
Okay. If you want to do that, you would roll a d20 and add your dexterity modifier, if that is something you would like to do.
Can I try to catch it in my mouth?
Okay.
You have to roll for that.
Yeah, you would have to roll for that.
Okay, what's the roll?
Okay, so first I need Runjir to do an attack roll. So roll a d20 and add your dexterity modifier.
So that would be a 9.
A 9 total. Okay. And now is let's see, what is Urng's armor class? Or are you actually trying to catch it in your mouth?
Yeah, I'm trying to catch it in my mouth.
Oh, well, in that case, excuse me. I would say, Caitlin, you can actually roll that again and see if you can get a higher score. Because he's intentionally
19.
trying to get hit.
Your ass is going down, buddy.
Oh yeah. So you fling it down there.
22.
Yeah. So with a total of 22, that will definitely hit, and he catches it in his mouth. You actually toss it down, and there's this sort of confluence of events as you see his mouth opening just to catch whatever it is you're going to throw, and you manage to just get the perfect line on there. Now, I need you to do a Constitution saving throw, because you just had a ball bearing launched into the back of your throat from about 30 feet above you. So,
I rolled a 1. Just.
All right. So you spend a couple minutes choking on this ball bearing, and as you're choking, there's you feel the small ball bearing, which is maybe a quarter of an inch across, just lodging itself in your throat, and then as you try to inhale sharply, you don't feel it in your throat anymore. Instead, you feel this weird feeling in the left side of your chest, and then you feel it move down a little bit and then lodge itself there. And the ball bearing is now lodged inside your left lung.
I just kind of give a frown and continue to climb.
All right.
It's normal for me. I don't know what else is in there.
All right. Well, so you now have a ball bearing lodged in your lung. Every time you breathe, there's this weird pinching sensation in there. It's very uncomfortable. You're also you're going to take. Let me see here. That's going to be. You're going to take 1 point of damage as you cough very violently. So knock 1 hit point off of your total.
All right.
I'm not the best team player. Very self-serving. So I'm just.
No. When the police come and take away all of our gear, I can just cut open my chest and use that ball bearing for something.
Yeah, that's problem solving.
All right then. So you guys want to continue climbing up into this cloud?
Yeah, are we there yet? Like,
so over the next
velocity of this vine going up.
The velocity of the vine going up is pretty slow. You're actually climbing a little faster than it's growing, but because you waited a little bit to actually get on it, it's just ahead of you by now. But you can actually see the tip of the vine up ahead of you, growing up into the cloud. And now that you guys are all working your way up through the cloud, Runjir can actually see ahead of them the light starting to peek through the cloud from directly above. There's a sort of diffused golden light coming through from above, from where the sun is coming through. And after a few minutes of climbing, you start to make out shapes above you, off to your right-hand side. And going up farther and farther, the light gets brighter, and then things start to clear, and you can actually see blue sky and much higher clouds above. And going up farther and farther, you're now able to turn and see that this cloud isn't just clouds. There are structures up here.
Can we see what kind of structures? Like, are the structures informative to us of who inhabits them?
Do a perception check. You're just getting to the point where you can actually see these structures. So roll a d20 and add your perception modifier.
So that's 17. That's 14 for Crystal. That's 12 for me.
Yes. I have a +1, 15.
Okay. So just because Runjir is higher on this this vine, which is now poking its way up through the top of the cloud, she can see that there's one very large structure that looks almost like a cottage. It certainly looks like a house, except it is the biggest house, or at least the biggest in scale house you have ever seen. Next to this house, there is what looks like a gently sloping lawn that just kind of fades down into the cloud, coming towards you. And there is at least one large tree growing out of the lawn, which is absolutely gigantic. It is the biggest tree you have ever seen in your life. It's about 200 feet tall and has an incredibly thick trunk. It actually looks like an apple tree. And there are indeed some very large apples which have fallen onto this lawn right next to it. Each of these apples is the size of a large pumpkin. And as you climb up, you get this very strange feeling that you have somehow come level with the slope of the lawn. And as you reach down with one foot to try to push onto the vine, you realize that you can't push on the vine. There is something below your foot that feels like kind of spongy grass. So you're still attached to the vine. You can see the vine going down, but you can't touch it beyond a certain point. Beyond a certain point, your foot just hits some sort of grass.
Okay, so there's like magic keeping us trapped in this zone, right?
And that's what it appears, yeah.
Okay. How far, so to get to this sloping lawn, do we just step off this vine, or do we have to do like an athletic check and jump off?
Well, you're not quite sure. Do a perception check. And while you're doing that perception check, we're going to pause for a minute. So what were the results of your check, Runjir?
Ooh.
So it's D20 plus what stat?
Do we'll call it just a general intelligence check, actually, just to see what you can.
7.
Yeah, so you're not actually sure. It seems like what's going on right now is the misty stuff under your feet right now somehow seems solid. It's bizarre.
Okay.
is a little unsettling because directly below you, you can see your friends down through the mist.
All right, so I'll be the first one to step off and see if I can walk and make progress towards the lawn and the buildings.
All right. So, yeah, you step off onto what is apparently just mist, and it holds. It feels like you are actually walking on a lawn. It's really bizarre. And you can the mist actually comes up to about mid-thigh on you. And you can actually see where you're stepping just appears to be clear. But then as it goes farther towards the house.
What does the mist go up to on Embria if she's normal size?
That'll be maybe her knee.
Okay, so like to my forehead.
Well, your forehead would be at Embria's waist, roughly.
Okay.
Or her hip.
Okay, so it's not really like a lawn gnome, like a mid-sized person gnome.
Yeah, I will say that.
All right, just check it. Yeah. See, I was thinking like gnome from WoW, and they're like the size of a Yorkshire Terrier. So
they're a little taller than that. Yeah.
So we're all wading through the mist, and you just completely shrouded. But I'm there.
Yeah.
Which would actually work towards the rogue thing. So that isn't necessarily a bad thing.
You just hear through the thick fog. Do you know the way?
Oh boy.
You lied, the queen. No. All right, back at it. So do I have to roll to be able to step out? Or
you can try stepping out and see what happens.
16 plus, and that would be intelligence?
Well, you did an intelligence check. You were trying to figure out exactly what was going on here. You weren't really sure. All you could tell is that it feels fairly solid under your foot. I mean, it's a little bit squishy like a lawn is. But aside from that, you're not really sure what's going on there.
All right, so I step out and I look around and kind of see what Embria and if they're following me, like what's their gauge on the situation.
All right.
So yeah, I'm climbing up next, right?
Yeah, you are behind. And it appears that your small gnomish friend above you is just standing on more or less nothing above you.
That's weird. Okay, she's gonna, I guess, climb up, and I guess when she reaches that same point where she hits the ground, or the ground's there, she's just sort of looking at Brungier, clutching to the vine, not really testing it yet for herself, just watching the rogue first.
Okay, so Brungier, as you're standing here, you can see that from being more or less transparent, it actually fades into being a lawn that is completely fully visible, with which slopes up and out of the fog around your thighs. Mm-hmm. It's a very strange effect, and it's a little bit unsettling because you don't know exactly where it might end.
Well, naturally being a deceptive human, I'm always suspicious of my surroundings, so I'm constantly checking. And even though we're waiting for to come up, I'm an asshole, so I'm not waiting. I'm just going to keep going forward and start checking things out. So I'm making my way. And can I do do I just observe the buildings for any like entrances or anything like that, or do I have to do an intellect check for that?
Yeah, do a perception check to see what kind of entrances there might be.
So I'm doing a perception check to see if maybe not a front door, because that's kind of risky because we don't know if these are good or bad. We're assuming these people are not of good intent because they're throwing massive piles of fruit at us, rocks, and that is very rude. So I'm specifically looking for windows, back doors, anything except a front door.
Yeah, sure. So roll a d20 and add your perception modifier.
Okay. So 8 plus 3, 11.
All right. So you can definitely see that there is a door. This is a very small cottage. It looks like maybe a 2-room cottage, and relatively small. It's being 2 rooms, it would be considered small, but in reality, it's a good very tall. It must be about 100 feet high, and the door itself is probably a good 75 feet high. Just because the wall of this cottage is so wide, you can't really see beyond it. All you can see is that there is a whitewashed wall with one window to the left of it, and there's a large wooden door which has a handle that's way higher than you would ever be able to reach. Aside from that, you can see that over on the left side, there are some things that you can't quite identify over there. Something that looks kind of like plant-like and organic on the lawn, though the slope of it is too much for you to see over right now.
All right.
So
where's in all this?
He would be working his way up. What are you doing?
Well, my chest hurts pretty bad, but like I'm about to crest over into the invisible thing, and I kind of try to breathe in the air around me, but the ball bearing is taking up too much space, so I get all of the evil in me. I'm going to hop up on the invisible stuff and just see. I'm going to get a feel for like if I recognize any of the plants or if these buildings are at all artistically inclined.
How do you mean? Like, how, artistically how?
Well, are they artful enough, like in their...
Are you asking how crude the construction is?
Yeah, how crude is the construction? Because like if it passes a certain level of aesthetics, my character has to be mad at it.
Okay. In that case, do a perception check. So D20 plus your perception modifier in that same column.
All right, so we got 14.
14. I mean, it looks well constructed. It doesn't look incredibly artful, I suppose. It's more of like a rustic cottage that you might see, I don't know, maybe in like rural France or something. It's more built for function than form.
I'm going to just nod in approval, but what about the plants around me? Do I recognize any of them?
So what you're standing on right now seems to be completely invisible, but then it fades into what looks like an absurdly large-scale lawn. Aside from that, you don't see any other plants aside from a very, very large apple tree, which it's got to be at least 100, maybe 200 feet tall. It's hard to judge from where you are. And there are apples hanging from it that look to be as large as pumpkins. Those are the only actual plants that you can see right here. It seems this entire thing is one small hill covered in grass, at least from what you can see from this angle, with a small cottage on it and the tree, and you can just barely make out a bit of a chair around the left side of the house.
All right, so I guess I'm just going to walk up to the front door and like punch it as hard as I can, because I suppose that's like knocking.
All right.
I see this happening and I like dip. I go to the back side of it because in my head, since I'm small and sneaky, well, he's obviously going to draw attention to himself with whoever's in that house. So I'm thinking that maybe I can flank the back and investigate while Embria and are keeping the front busy and occupied.
Okay.
Yeah.
Speaking of Embria.
Yeah, she's going to cringe a little bit at Aaron's very forward approach, but stay there kind of after kind of seeing that Rangier, as usual, kind of snuck off to the side. So she's just going to stand there and kind of like straighten her shoulders and try and look presentable and see what happens after the knocking.
All right. So I need to make a strength check to essentially knock on this door.
All right.
So, yeah, roll a d20 and add your strength modifier.
Is the strength modifier the +3 or the 17?
It's the +3.
All right, so 5.
5. All right. So you go to just level a punch at this huge wooden door. Your hand strikes it, and the rough surface kind of cuts your knuckles up, and you instinctively pull back almost as soon as you hit it because it's just like, oh, God damn, I just hurt my hand. And there is sort of like a cracking of wood against your knuckles, which is audible, but it's not incredibly loud.
Can I use my staff instead to whap it against the door pretty hard a couple of times?
Yeah, sure. Meanwhile, what is Runjir doing as you're working your way around the backside of the house?
Can I check to make sure that none of the plants are poisonous?
Sure. Actually, working your way around, this would be the right side of the house, which appears to be the backside more. You now see that there are some relatively small shrubs. They are about 3 times your height, and you recognize them as being, you would just naturally recognize them as being ordinary shrubs, except gigantic in size. You don't see any that look particularly weird, though you can try to maybe pull off a leaf and test it, or maybe rub it on your wrist, that type of thing, if you want to.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay. Yeah.
Like they always say in the hair dye boxes, patch tests before you put on your whole head in case there's an accident.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do that.
Okay, yeah. So, do a nature check for me. So, D20 plus your nature skill.
+3, so that's 11.
As far as you know, these plants that you're looking at and kind of doing a little bit of a taste test with, they don't appear to be any sort of weird, bizarre, poisonous thing. They're more, they're well kept, and they appear to be just kind of decorative. What is Embria doing at this point? Hello?
She's without words.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, dear. Oh, yeah.
Pondering.
Yeah. There's been no reaction to knocking at the door.
Not initially, though. As he goes to slam his staff on it, it's significantly louder now that he's got some actual wood to smack on there. And after a couple seconds, you do hear some sort of scuffling sound from inside. It sounds almost like if there was a really large log or something that was dropped on the ground, that scale of thump, that's kind of what you hear from the other side of the door. And it sounds like a mix of that and a foot or a boot heel tapping on a tile floor. And then there's another and another and another, and then they stop.
You mentioned I couldn't reach the window, right?
You probably wouldn't be able to reach the window because it's about 30 or 40 feet up.
Well, I have an idea. I have daggers. So can I check what the material of the wall is to see if I can grapple up it with my daggers?
Sure. Yeah.
Way much.
Yeah. As you kind of poke at the wall, it appears that this is made of probably stone with plaster over the outside. It's very, very hard. It'd be very difficult to stick your daggers into it, and it's fairly smooth. Right. So as and Embria are standing at the door, the thumping that seemed to be coming closer stops. And then a couple seconds later, the door starts to swing inwards with a slight creak of the hinges.
I guess I'm going to just look up and just kind of yell hello.
So as this door swings open, it's a little bit darker on the inside, so you don't initially know what you're looking at, but then looking up and up and up, you see standing before you inside the now open door, standing on a tiled floor that's intricately designed inside of what appears to be, if it were in a much smaller scale, a small kitchen, a figure, humanoid, with light blue skin and bright white hair. wearing very simple clothing and leather boots that appear to be made from some animal, the scale of which you have certainly never seen before. It stands there, and looking at it more, you can see that it appears very youthful. Actually, it appears to be if it were a smaller person, it would probably be a 13 or 14-year-old boy. And you can see that its cheeks actually have acne on it, and its teeth are a little bit crooked as it opens its mouth just a little bit, looking down at the tiny figures standing before it. And as it regards you, you can see it mouthing some words, and then you hear it just say, "Oh, shit." And the door slams in front of you, and you hear this sort of scrabbling sound as the same voice calls across through the house, "Someone's here! Someone's here! Oh, they're going to kill us! Oh, we're dead! Oh, Ben, we're so dead!"
Can I try to persuade him to come out?
You want to walk back over the door?
Yeah.
Okay. Embria, do you want to do anything?
I think her instinct would be to kind of tug away from the door when it closes, because her thought is whoever's in there is going to bring their friends back, and it's probably not going to be great. So she's trying to like tug on him to kind of go back towards around the side of the house where Rangier went.
All right.
Use diplomacy.
Okay.
Well, you can attempt to use diplomacy if you want, as your friend is trying to drag you away. Meanwhile, Rangier, you want to run up to the door and try to get in?
I would like to first, before I use the siege tactics, I would like to talk, because I have very good persuasion skills. So maybe we can escalate as needed, so we can try to keep the situation calm. Maybe I can go up to the door and call out and say that we just have questions, we just want to talk, we are neutral, we mean no harm.
All right. So, you go up and you pound on the door. And what do you want to say?
I want to say that we mean no harm. We just want to know why there's giant pieces of fruit and vegetables falling on the town below.
All right. So after a couple of minutes of trying to sort of yell this through the door, you hear those thumping footsteps again. And they're coming towards the door. And eventually, the door creaks open just a little bit. And way above you, probably 50 or 60 feet up, you can see one large, very frightened looking eye looking down at you from above. You can see a little bit of pock marks on the cheeks. It appears that this might be maybe an older sibling or something of the one who answered the door before. And it says, "What do you want? What are you gonna do?"
So, from what I understand, the rest have fallen back. So I'm just sitting there confronting him. So as he opens the door, I just turn to him and smoothly lie and say, "We've been given a contract to figure out where this fruit's coming from. Nothing in it states we have to do anything. We just have to figure out why this fruit's coming from and make sure it stops happening." So I basically tried to deceive him into telling me why he's throwing this stuff down and try to get him to stop.
Okay. Do a deception check. So D20 plus your deception modifier.
All right, so that's 13.
All right. So he, this figure, from the very little you can see of its face, seems very skeptical at first. But as you're talking to him, he keeps looking back inside the house and coming back to look at you with one very frightened looking eye. And then he slowly pulls the door open. And you can see that this figure is similar to the other. He's got light blue skin, slightly darker, but still almost white gray hair. Pockmarked skin. He looks like he is maybe in his mid-teens, or at least he would if he were a human. And dressed in very similar clothing. And you can see between his legs his friend or sibling or something hiding behind a corner in the house, just beyond a doorway, sort of looking out at you, telling its older sibling something that you can't understand in a language that you don't know. And the older sibling says something back. There's a short exchange, and then the older sibling turns back to you and says,
"We're really sorry. We were just having fun. You're not going to tell our parents, are you?"
I turn to them and I say, look, as long as you stop, I get my money. So I don't give a shit what they do up here. Just don't do it anymore. Otherwise, we will have to come back and make a problem. I literally just want my money.
Now that it appears like they're not being met with violence, Embria's like going back to the doorway so she can kind of have see everything and have a proper conversation, looking around, seeing everything. And she says to them, "Are you aware that you're above the town of Wulfbridge? Did you just move here?"
We know the town is down there. We were just having some fun. We were gonna drop some eggs too. I'm sorry.
Well, you could have hurt people, right?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Well, you can't keep throwing stuff like this down at the town. Are your parents home?
We kind of took this cloud without them knowing. We live back in the mountains.
What mountains are those?
The ones to the southwest. We were just having some fun. Please don't tell them. They'll get really angry.
Well, the people down in Wulfbridge are a little upset at your fun. Are you going to stop?
Yes, we're going to stop. I'm sorry.
Okay, as they're talking, my head is turning. At first, I was like, as long as we get him to stop, it's fine. But then I'm thinking, if we kill a giant and somehow bring proof back to the city, how much would we be rewarded? So as she's sitting there, I'm like stroking my chin, thinking about if I want to like launch an assault on this dude while he's just talking calmly to her. So I start looking suspicious.
All right. And what is doing?
I'm gonna try and like intimidate him a little bit and be like, "Take cloud, move to different mountain, drop things on mountain instead," and like try to fish out the ball bearing with my finger.
All right.
I might scare them.
Do a oh geez, I don't even know what kind of check that would be. I guess a dexterity, maybe a medicine check. Yeah, do a medicine check. See if you can kind of hack this thing out of your throat and catch it.
All right. one medicine, and so 16.
So it's quite an interesting sight here on top of this cloud as a giant blue giant talks very calmly to a very motherly Embria while Runjir looks around suspiciously, and in the background we hear as Mur tries to very successfully, actually, hack out a ball bearing which has lodged itself in his lung. It takes a good 5 minutes, and during that time, everyone just kind of turns to look at you. Both of the giants actually step outside and look down at your friends, curious, and back at you, and everyone just kind of watches your little display as you slowly manage to get that thing higher out of your lung until you're finally rolling on the ground, smacking your own chest, trying to get it out. And then in one huge sort of sound, it just launches out of your mouth and bounces along the floor, along the ground, settling between two large blades of grass.
All right, I'm just going to walk over to it, pick it up, hold it up, and say, or else.
Okay, do an intimidation check.
Intimidation. 12.
So the older of the two giants looks down at Embria and back at you, back at Embria again, and says,
"What's wrong with him?"
I wish I had a clear answer for you. I really do. He just had a little something stuck in his throat. I think he's okay now.
Medicine magic.
Yeah. So some of the people in the town, because of your fun, had their homes and their goods damaged. Do you have a way to pay for that?
I don't think we do. Oh no, our parents are gonna kill us. What can we do to help?
Well, maybe we can come in and look around, and we could help you find something that we could give the town so they wouldn't be mad at you anymore, and then maybe your parents don't have to hear about this.
All right, I'm sitting here listening to her talk to him like this, and I'm just rolling my eyes. So as they're distracted by his hacking performance, and she's speaking calmly to them, and they're completely distracted, I quietly whip out my short bow, which says it's in my inventory, and aim directly at his eye. Do I have to roll to see if I can hit him?
Yeah, whose eye? The older or the older or younger giant?
First, whoever is the one that's directly speaking to.
That would be the older one, and you. So let me just a second.
Can I prevent this at all by throwing the ball bearing at her?
I would say. Do a perception check with disadvantage since you are going to be hacking your lungs out while this is occurring.
18.
18. And Runjir, are you trying to do this stealthily?
Yeah.
Okay, then roll a stealth check. It's going to be versus his perception.
9. So that's D20 plus perception, right? Or is it stealth?
Stealth.
I guess it's the same thing. 9.
Okay. So while you are hacking your lungs up, you do actually notice that she is drawing her short bow and taking aim. But in the middle of hacking, you're so overwhelmed with this feeling that this thing is almost out that you involuntarily can't do anything to stop her. You're also a bit far away, so there's also that. Meanwhile, I want Runjir to do an attack roll. So that's going to be a D20 plus whatever it says to hit with your short bow.
Yeah, well, also, I'm really good at acrobatics, so could I roll to see him throwing the thing at me and use my acrobatics to jump out of the way and still try to make a shot?
Well, he's just he's not really going to get a chance to do that before you actually get the shot off because he didn't notice in time.
All right, so then I'm rolling d20 plus what?
It's going to be let me pull up your character sheet real quick. Just a moment. That's going to be... I should have had this open beforehand, but I'm a terrible human. Doopa-doopa-doo. That is going to be a plus 6 to hit. So D20 plus 6.
Dang.
All right, so 18.
18 will hit. So you pull out your short bow while everyone else is distracted, and just as is about to say, "Wait, look!" As you are doing this, you launch an arrow directly at the face of the large giant. All right, roll damage. That's going to be 1d8 plus 3. Or sorry, 1d6 plus 3.
5.
All right. So this giant, not even realizing that you were going to attack it, is actually going to take sneak attack damage. So it's going to get roll hurt. It's going to take a bunch of damage, and it's let's see here. It's not going to realize what happened. It's just going to be like, as a small arrow
into his eye or just in his face?
Oh yeah, it made it directly into his eye. It was a direct hit, and he claps his hand over his eye and just lets out this bellow that is just deafeningly loud. And he staggers back, unsure of what's happening. All right, what are Embria and Mur doing?
What are their reactions?
Oh God.
I'll let her go first because I am torn about this.
Emria gasps in shock and covers her mouth as she just suddenly sees this arrow soaring into this humanoid's eye. She's gonna whip her head around and look at Runjir, giving the angry "what the hell" look.
Of course, I'm like, if we bring his head down, we'll get more money.
Can I attempt to cram the newly removed ball bearing down her throat?
You would have to
deal with an angry thing right now.
Well, you would have to run up to her and try to attack her. But yeah, you could certainly try.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. So you just you just barrel up to her and start to try and force this thing down her throat. Do an attack roll. So that's going to be roll a d20 and add I guess this is going to be your strength modifier as you attempt to shove this thing down her throat.
I rolled a natural 20.
All right. So Runjir, before you can even react, this very angry barbarian is just on top of you, ball bearing in hand, and he just starts shoving his hand in your mouth, and just you feel as a wet ball bearing, still warm from being inside his body, gets shoved down your throat. And you're going to, so that's going to be a D4 plus your strength modifier. So roll that, and we'll see if you knock any of her teeth out while you're doing this. Well, that that'll be that's going to be Mur, who is rolling that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So yeah, roll a d4 and add your strength modifier.
4.
4.
4 plus.
That's 3.
Oh boy.
I liked my teeth.
Yeah.
I
So.
learned how to express my displeasure from you.
So, almost knocking you to the ground, this barbarian just gets on top of you, shoves his hand directly in your mouth. It's so large compared to your gnomish form that it actually splits the edges of your lips just a little bit as he crams it in and just drops and starts to push the ball bearing down your throat in a rage. As this happens, your 2 front teeth actually get knocked into your mouth, and you can feel just a little bit of blood trickling down. It's very, very unpleasant. Meanwhile, the large giant is just stomping around with his hand over his eye, not knowing what to do, wailing in pain, and his younger friend or sibling or whoever is letting out this really deep bellowing yell in terror at what's happening as these small creatures have now decided to just attack his friend. And with that, I need you guys to roll initiative. So, roll a d20 and add your initiative modifier. That's going to be up at the top of the sheet, just below your armor class.
That is a straight
4.
16.
Alrighty, so 16. Ooh, the Giants rolled surprisingly well. Okay. So let's.
So 15.
Okay, so that's going to be Giants. Let me just make sure to actually write this down here. Okay. And it's going to be Caitlin is next. Alrighty, so at the top of the round, we have the Giants. Now, one of them is just in shock. He doesn't know what's going on. He's never been hurt like this before. He's got a little arrow sticking out of his eyeball, and he's panicking. He's terrified. And he actually runs around the side of the house, terrified. Meanwhile, the other one, the smaller one with pimples on his face, actually runs back into the house, and you can see that he picks up a chair and just he throws it at you guys, just trying to get you away. It's a huge chair, so it's with all of you guys in the same sort of general space, he's going to have to roll to hit each of you. So that's going to be, that one definitely misses. That is a, 1 second. Oh my goodness. That's going to be a 32 to hit Caitlin, and that's going to be a 16 to hit on Embria.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, so it luckily it misses, although it hits Embria and Rungier. So that's going to be a total of, oh my goodness, oh that's a lot. That's going to be 1, 2, 3. Oh my. It's going to be 16 bludgeoning damage as the, oh my goodness, I just rolled that wrong. It's going to be more than that, probably, actually. I'm rolling the wrong attack. I'm sorry.
How is that with the whole swallowing her own teeth thing?
That's in addition to. So yeah, she's going to be taking more damage. So that's 6.
I'm so sorry.
15.
It's okay. Karma's a bitch to bitches. What can I say?
So that's going to be 25 damage to both Embria and Rangier as this gigantic chair just flies through the air, pummeling you guys, soaring just over the head of and crashing into the grass. No, armor is going to be just how hard it is to hit you. So unless you have armor that protects against bludgeoning damage specifically, that you're going to take the whole thing.
Like a chest shield.
Well, yeah, but he didn't even get hit, actually, luckily.
Oh.
So,
Okay,
yes.
that needed the chest shield.
Yeah, it would appear that way. So with that out of the way, it's going to bring it to Embria's turn. What are you going to do?
So, sorry to interrupt. It's my maximum hit points is 31, so I do minus 25 for the bludgeoning, and how much for my free dental?
Oh, that was, I believe that was 8 damage, if I'm not mistaken. I could be completely mistaken. I'm sure that if anybody listens to this recording, they'll say differently, but we'll call it 8. So the total is going to be 30 something.
Well,
40?
I'm dead.
Yeah. Well, you would be completely knocked out then. So then, yeah, Embria, what are you doing? Do you have any hit points left?
I do.
Okay.
So let's see. Just for funsies, I think I'm gonna use. I'm gonna cast Misty Step to teleport 30 feet to an unoccupied space you can see.
Okay.
And that's just she's gonna go in the direction of the side of the house, just trying to get out of direct aim.
Okay.
For this these upset giants.
Sounds good. Okay.
That's gonna happen.
Alrighty.
And she'd like to speaking kind of a free action, right?
Yeah.
Okay. She's I don't know, she's just gonna yell like frantically, like, stop! Everyone stop! We're not here to hurt anyone. And while she like kind of glaring at Rangier while she says that, like, we're not here to hurt anyone.
All right. I'd like you to do a persuasion check.
Okay. Come back up here. So that's 18 plus 4, 22.
All right, cool. Okay. And Caitlin, do a charisma check for me.
That's with the D20, right?
Yes, roll a d20 and add your persuasion skill.
And you're
That'd
still
be a 9.
Yeah. So, as your friend has just disappeared around the side of the house, you can hear her voice coming from around that corner, and it sounds surprisingly persuasive to you. It's initially you were really just focused on the idea of bringing these giants down, but your friend is being really, really persuasive. So, meanwhile, that's actually going to bring it to your turn. So what does Rangier want to do on her turn? Oh, wait, actually, you're knocked out. Never mind. You don't even need
Can
to be...
I roll to wake up?
You don't even need to be persuaded because you were knocked out. So you're actually going to do a death saving throw. So what that means is roll a d20. If it's above 10, you're fine. If it's below 10...
20, bitches!
All right. Yeah. So... that is going to be a success on the death saving throw. You have to do 2 more of those, and then you'll be conscious and back to 1 hit point. If you fail 3 of them, you will be completely dead. Just FYI.
I didn't realize that was enough. That had been enough to knock you out. Okay.
Well, she had already taken some hit points off from getting the free dental work, as it were, like you mentioned before. So,
high intelligence, low wisdom.
Very clearly.
So then I guess that was kind of the giants to that we don't have to escalate this. We don't have to throw any more chairs.
All right. Then it would be your turn. Is there anything you want to do?
I'm just going to stand up, having freshly inserted the ball into her lung. And just kind of like turn around and just say, like, she had bad behavior ball. People who do bad get bad behavior ball. And just kind of like said, I told you so.
Okay, are you trying to convince the giant that she's now going to behave, essentially?
Yeah, I'm trying to intimidate them to just take their cloud back, else they meet the same fate.
Okay, do an intimidation check.
+2, so 16.
All right, so that's going to be the giant who just threw the chair at you guys. He seems just genuinely terrified in general. But now he is also genuinely terrified of you specifically. So yeah, make of that what you will. You could still do an attack, an action, an attack, a bonus action, and a movement on your turn, if you want to.
Well, I could just say, like, I'm gonna tell them to move the cloud and then just pick up Rungier and start walking towards the vine so that I head back down.
All right. Yeah. You since Rungier is a teeny tiny little gnome, you just toss her over your shoulder and start just walking. And as you pick up the form of your completely fucking knocked out friend, currently bleeding out, probably internally, the giant behind, as you're walking, sort of in a walking away from an explosion, sort of cool guy manner, you hear this like coming from behind you as you walk towards the vine, which is continuing to grow upwards. That's going to bring it back to the top of the round with the giants. They're freaking terrified because they have no idea what's going on. Some little people just came and attacked them and scared the shit out of them. So that's going to bring it to Embria's turn. Are you doing anything specific?
Okay. Well, after she kind of poofed out of the way, recompose herself and go back to the door, seeing that there's been no more aggro from the giants and they seem kind of scared. She's going to straighten herself out. She's just going to address them again and I think probably try and use some persuasion or performance or something, but explain that boulder that you threw killed our friend's family there. She came up here seeking vengeance. So you can see is it a she or he? I forget. Rungier.
It was a he.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
He. Yeah. So you could see why he's angry and wants vengeance. We don't want any more death. So do you have anything that you can pay as far as tribute to try and make amends for the terrible, terrible things that you did?
So do a deception check with advantage.
Sorry, 13 plus 7, 20.
Yeah. So this now cowering giant who is just looking at you from around the side of a doorway, visibly shaking, says in a low rumbling voice that he thinks there might be a sack of coins in his parents' bedroom and he'll go and get it. Meanwhile, Caitlin, or rather Rungier, I need you to do another death saving throw. So roll a d20. All right, that's one more success. So you are one away from being conscious again and back to 1 hit point. Mm-hmm. All right, and is there anything you want to do in your turn aside from going over to the vine and working your way down?
Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tie up Rungier, but ensure that she's stable and not going to die. So that I can just kind of carry her down tied to me somehow. Okay.
Then do a medicine check. So D20 plus your medicine skill.
7 plus, where's medicine? 1, 1, so 8.
Yeah, it seems that when the gigantic chair smashed into Rungir's body, it certainly broke several bones, and you can see that there's this sort of, it looks like a bruise spreading on this tiny gnome's chest, spreading actually visibly. There is a speed to it that you can see. It's not like it's not this slow development of a bruise like is usual. You get the impression that she might be bleeding on the inside slowly, and you're not really able to stop it right now. But you are able to successfully tie him up and sort of get him into a position where you can just like have him slung to your chest, almost like in a baby Bjorn, and just see where things go from there if you want to.
All right, yeah, that's my plan. And I'm just gonna now that I have her nice and prepped, I'm just gonna begin setting up to make my way back down, because now that they're scared, they're gonna leave and we're gonna get the money.
All right, cool. So that's going to bring it back to the top of the round. And at this point, we're sort of out of initiative. You can still hear the giant crying from on the other side of the very large house. But around this time, Embria, you see the younger of the two giants running back to you with this pouch of coins that is about 6 feet tall. It is made of the hide of some beast. It might have been made of an elephant for all you know. And it drops the sack in front of you, and it sort of slumps there with the resounding clashing of huge chunks of metal. And the giant looks at you and says,
I hope this is enough.
And he kneels down and pulls the drawstring open, and you can see discs of metal in there that are about a foot across. They're maybe even more. Some of them are actually the size of manhole covers, and several of them look like they're made of gold, others like silver. More than a few look like smaller, at least, discs of copper.
Okay. Trying to remain stern and also trying not to look completely shocked at this giant bag of precious metal discs that could probably fetch a really fair price back down on the ground. She's gonna see about how heavy are one of these. She's gonna try and just to take like one and kind of gauge. She knows she has to climb back down with this too.
Yeah.
She's very highly doubt she can take all that.
Yeah, so the gold discs are the largest ones, and they are also obviously the heaviest ones. Those are the ones that look like they're about the size of a manhole cover. The silvers are about a foot across, and the coppers are about 6 inches, maybe about the size of your open palm or something. Each of them is an inch or more thick, and each one has intricate designs that have been hammered onto them, sort of pressed in there, and they are super fucking heavy. The ones that are the gold ones are too heavy for you to even lift. They weigh so much that they are actually as they kind of plonk down, they're so heavy that they start to bend under their own weight because they're made of such soft metal.
Okay, so maybe she's gonna try and grab one or two silver and maybe tie them with some of the extra rope from the pack, like tie them together to make carrying a couple of them a little bit easier, and sort of like fashion a sling like backpack style.
Mm-hmm.
She's gonna do that. Was coming back over after leaving Rungir.
He's kind of gonna look over at you and see, like, gauge how much of those that you can tie to him, while also being able to carry Rungir down as well.
Okay.
He's a pack animal.
Yeah. All right. What if we? Everybody's gonna suggest maybe swapping that shield that was tied to you for one of the coins.
Yeah, I can agree to that. He just nods and just kind of tosses the shield down on the floor.
Okay. So yeah, maybe try and get away with a gold for that one.
Yeah, we can put a gold on my chest, and I'll kind of like. I don't like the art on it very much, but I'll frown at it.
Okay, about this time, I need Rungir to make one last death saving throw.
Oh God, we gotta go.
All right. D20. Fuck.
So that is a failure, and apparently that's not going to be the last death saving throw. However, now that you guys are out of combat, you can work a little more carefully to stabilize your now completely KO'd friend, if you so desire. If you don't want to, you don't have to.
Okay,
I'll continue kind of like strapping all these things and like preparing the trip down, because I very clearly don't have the intelligence to help her.
Okay.
Or him.
and then kind of annoyed at Rungier for Emery's going to take, I think she can manage a silver for herself and maybe take 2 of the coppers and kind of find a way to attach them to Rungier.
Okay.
Probably that's about it. And then after they've done all that, she looks at the giants and kind of gives them, another stern, but like a nod. Like, yeah, I think this will be okay.
Okay, do an intimidation check with advantage.
Ooh, that's better. 18 plus 4, 22.
Oh yeah. The as soon as you turn back and give this very curt nod, the giant just is taken aback, and it seems genuinely scared of you, even though you barely come up above its ankles.
She like points a finger at him and says, "Take your cloud. Don't come back. And we don't have to tell your parents about this."
Okay.
Okay.
And you want to try and stabilize Rungier?
Yeah, I guess.
All right. It takes a few minutes, a little bit of concerted effort, but putting pressure in the right places and using your fairly limited knowledge of medicine, you're able to stop some of the bizarre, crazy internal bleeding and crushed awfulness. And Rungier is now back up to 1 hit point.
Yay.
Yay, you're back in the game. And you now have some giant discs of metal strapped to your body.
And tied down to a larger person.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that I just can't interject.
Yeah. That was the general idea. I just wanted to make sure, because I hadn't heard from you in a while. Yeah, and I know connectivity issues, right? But yeah. So you are now back up to 1 hit point, and you are able to interact with the outside world again, and you find that your body feels horrible. Your parts of you feel crushed and floppy that should not feel crushed and floppy. Other parts feel very stiff, and you realize there are just discs of metal weighing on you, and you are currently attached to the barbarian friend of yours as he baby Bjorns you down the vine. All right, Embria, are you doing anything else? Or are you just gonna follow your friends downward to the town?
Yeah, as she heads back toward, still trying to keep this very stern, intimidating look. She's got her finger out at the giants while she backs up a couple steps, and then she turns on her heel to go towards the vine, but then she's kind of looking at okay, let's go. And going towards the vine so they can start climbing down, and trying to see if she can get that little, you know what? I'm actually going to cast a spell, as warlocks sometimes do. I would like to cast on myself spider climb.
All right, then.
So I can have some, you
can
myself climb down a little easier now that I've got this extra weight and stuff.
Yeah, so in casting Spider Climb on yourself, you're able to essentially just put one foot onto the side of the vine, put the other foot up, and just walk right on down. And it's interesting because as you start walking on down, whereas before you were able to just kind of lift a foot off and stand on something transparent, now that it seems you have some intention of going through it, you're just able to go straight on through. It's an odd sensation. You can actually feel it kind of brushing past you, but you just go right through and start walking down.
Okay, and then actually I realize I can cast this on other people, so I want to cast this on too. Rendir seems all set in his baby Bjorn, so cast Spider Climb on the Barbarian too.
Alrighty.
I am ecstatic at this, thinking that I'm magic.
Oh no! Oh, well.
All right. And you guys walk your way back down. And as you guys are walking down, straight down towards the village of Wulfbridge, you notice that it starts to get a little lighter. And even though it's kind of later in the day now, it's afternoon, and you would expect that by this point, if there were any clouds in the sky that were persisting, they just kind of stayed there for the rest of the day. Instead, today, a cloud is moving from above the town of Wulfbridge, and turning back, you can see that the large, roughly round gray cloud is now moving its way back towards the mountains to the southwest. And you realize that you were persuasive enough to get these joyriding giant teenagers going back to their parents, and working your way down into the town of Wulfbridge, bringing large, huge discs of metal back with you. The populace seem suddenly incredibly happy at your arrival. They seem to welcome you with open arms, and they point in awe at the huge discs of silver and copper that you bring with you. The giant disc of gold across his chest, and also they sort of point and laugh at the small battered gnome hanging from that chest. Yes.
Can I yell down at that bartender from the bartender, the younger guy?
Yes.
Hold the coin out behind his ear and just say, I show you a trick. I have coin behind your ear, and just kind of like dangle the big metal gold coin that's on my chest.
He seems genuinely terrified that there is a gigantic manhole cover sized disc of metal hanging above his head, and he just fucking books it. You can see him run away and hide behind a building. And as you guys work your way down, there's an air of celebration, and people start bringing out food and drinks, setting up tables in the town square to thank you for your service. There has been some damage to the town, but with your help, you've prevented more damage from happening. They weren't sure what was going on, but they knew they were terrified. And with that, eventually, after a day of celebration, carousing, and celebrating with the locals, you work your way back to the Adventurers Guild to receive your reward and, once again, to adventure another day. And with that, I think we'll end things for today. So, thank you guys. Thank you guys so much for playing. Thank you guys so much for playing. It was an absolute pleasure. I always have fun playing D&D, especially with groups who've never actually played before. I actually find that it's most fun for me when some of the players that I am playing with have never played D&D before, because there's this weird sense of adventure that isn't there in other cases. Well, thank you guys so much. I hope that you'll consider returning for future episodes of Dungeons and Devs. And I hope that the people who are listening to this, whoever you are, will consider listening. And if you're in the game development community, maybe signing up to be on Dungeons and Devs. But until next time, thank you guys, and I will see you all later.